All right, killers, welcome to episode 12. We go through chapters 44 through 50. No Fitz on this episode. He's serving a one-episode ban for his questionable behavior in the previous discussion. This is a tantalizing one where we go further into the seductive nature of Kvothe's hands and Denna's ears. Also, we discuss Elodin, one of the most interesting characters in the books. We see him do some unbelievable things, delve into his backstory, and speculate on what cracked him as we move through the rookery and discuss the psychological pressures arcantists put themselves through. And you'll get some insight into our tremendously impactful merch that we have coming, meeting a profound market need. I mean, think about it. How would people know how humble you are if you don't tell them? We're going to help you make it very clear just how impressive your humility is. We also discuss Elodin and Kvothe's chi, Kvothe jumping off a roof like only he can, and we deal with one of the great debates amongst readers of the Kingkiller books. Is there an all-important and revealing bathroom break for the characters within these chapters? Are there poops? Are there peas? Let's find out.
Welcome to the Kingkiller podcast. We're going to be a man down this episode. I felt like my threats from last episode of banning Tim and Fitz wouldn't be taken seriously if I didn't enforce it. So I had to kick out Fitz this week. So it's just going to be me and Tim. We're going to try to see how this works and see if we can get rid of that dead weight and see if it improves the quality of the show.
Good riddance.
Yeah.
It feels leaner. Feels leaner. I feel like we're more aerodynamic. Should be good.
Yeah, I cannot wait until Fitz is able to listen to this episode and he gets to feel like how smooth things could be. Like,
he really gets the impression of how much he's in the way.
Yeah. But no, Fitz had some family business to take care of, and so wanted to kind of carry on and keep the show moving so we can keep putting out episodes for you guys. And we left off last time on chapter 43, so we move into chapter 44 after he got banned from the archives. And so chapter 44 is titled The Burning Glass. In this chapter, Kvothe goes to the fishery, talks with Kelvin, who shows him his ever-burning lamps, ends up inviting him to join the fishery, and afterwards you got a lunch with Kvothe, Simon, Will, and Savoy, where they discuss who Kvothe should suck up to try to get brought up to the rank of Relar, and Kvothe ends up in his own mind settling on what it would be like to have Elodin as his teacher. So it's a great chapter. I love Kelvin. Kelvin's one of my favorite teachers.
Yeah, I like Kelvin a lot. The world gets built out a little bit further in the chapter with the distinct details of the fishery and what goes on there. But I especially like Kelvin because he's, after an example of an awful teacher, someone who should not be teaching, we get an example of someone who is actually a good teacher and actually enjoys what he's doing and knows where he's doing something where he belongs, and he has genuine, a great example of like his genuine, love for what he does is with his the lamps. I in particular really I like this scene. Kind of it's the beginning, where they make their way up into the rafters where they get to look at these different examples of all these different lamps, all these different attempts of making the ever-glowing lamp, I think is what it's called, right? Something like that.
Ever-burning.
Yeah. And I love the idea of how the different looks of the different lamps and just like what that would do to someone with Kvothe's imagination. It's really cool. And then we kind of see we kind of already knew what Kelvin liked about Kvothe and some of the things that he said during admissions and whatnot, but we really get a really clear sign of why he has been kind of bringing Kvothe into his circle when he starts to point out his guesses during his admissions were very close to the best attempts he's had.
Yeah, you got, like, he's among the Sieldar, their legends of ever-burning lamps. I believe that such a thing was once within the scope of our craft. 10 years I've been looking. I've made many lamps, some of them very good, very long burning. He looked at me, but none of them ever burning. And then he pointed out the one, and he's like, you should. White lithium salt. I thought of it 3 span before you came to us. It is good so far, 24 days, and I expect many more. He looked at me. Your guessing this thing surprised me, as it took me 10 years to think of it. Your second guess, sodium oil, was not as good. I tried it years ago, 11 days. But you gotta like that. This guy, he's a master. He's extremely knowledgeable. This is his wheelhouse. And it took him 10 years to come up with the guess that Kvothe got on, just off the top of his head without any kind of putting any kind of thought into it. He was able to guess that one. And even the lithium salt guess, which are not the sodium oil, he's like, that's not as good, but still it took him, at least a few years to come up with that as well. So Kvothe was fucking nailing it.
I also like just the little details of sodium oil. Who knows how long ago? Well, he said I tried it years ago. We don't know exactly, but he's like 11 days.
Yeah.
Like, he remembers all of these things. And
yeah.
we get little pieces of that throughout and Kvothe even talks about it, where it's like he just pictures like this guy's memory and how he just has these logs of everything that's anybody checks out, and like all these things where it's like he just has this memory where it's kind of fascinating to picture, his abilities. And it's kind of funny too, because of how he appears physically is not what you would expect. You wouldn't expect him to have a mind that works in that way, just based off of, the fact that he's just like this big burly bear looking dude. Yet his mind is like,
I always he'd be like Dan.
Yeah, but he has the mind of like a tremendously it seems like an accountant.
Yeah,
like or an engineer.
Yeah. He's definitely got that engineer mind where he's very calculating. He's got a very good memory. He's got all the calculation, like Kvothe talks about a number of times. Like, I bet this guy knows every single student owes to the fishery, or what he owes the students. Like, he's got all these calculations in his mind. When he talks to Kvothe about setting his foot on fire, the big thing he's focused on is the calculations for how that's possible. Or like when he breaks the water, the twice tough glass or whatever it was called, to save fella. His thing was going through the calculations on how all that's possible. Like, that's exactly how his mind, works, is that engineer type.
Also, I like how he talks. I like his approach with Kvothe. The dude has no room for empty gestures and pleasantries or any of that bullshit, which is nice, especially after someone like him. And you get little pieces of that where they have to play politics, and Kilvin doesn't have time for any of that shit. He's very much like, he wants results. He wants to understand, like basically how the world works, and that's tremendous, especially in this type of field. And if he's going to be your professor, the quickest route to the truth as possible is going to be the most effective. And he seems to he speaks to Kvothe that way. Like, he basically tells him what we're about to do. And then at the same time, like, he examines his hands. That was kind of interesting, again, with this character, just, but you're getting a piece of what this work is. Like, you're utilizing your hands as well as your mind, and they're both extraordinarily important. And it seems like Kvothe has a leg up with his hands as well. He's got the George Costanza hands.
Yeah. There's a ton of focus on hands in this book. Like, people, look at his hands for his playing music and the calluses on them, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you'd have, rougher hands," but no, your calluses are smooth, and there's just tons of that. Or like his paranoia about getting his hands cut when he's fighting in Adim. There's a ton of focus on his hands.
He's like, well, I said George Costanza, but it's almost like Charlie's uncle.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The lawyer,
always fixated on. Well, what
this
should I do? What
fucking
should I do? Well, like even in photos, like where should I put my hands? Like what should I do with the hands? It's like, the fuck are you talking about?
puts
And
on
he
like
wants
the
to put the
fake
lawyer's
hands
hands in
and
front of
stuff.
his.
Oh man, there's some great stuff with his uncle focused on his hands. It's hilarious.
It's like it's creepy in such an odd way. But yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, Rothfuss has that with Denna's hands. He also has that with ears. Well, not that, but he has this.
That was
sort of
Bass'
focus.
thing. Bass was focused on ears. It's like she's got perfect ears, and they both looked at him like, "What ears?" It's like, yeah, girls, they have the like perfect shape ears. He's, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, well, you're not paying attention. He's like defensive on it. Like,
I've always thought that was kind of strange because I've read authors before where they've wrote about a woman with perfect ears. They're so perfect she even has to cover them with her hair, and I'm just like, I mean, for me, as long as you don't notice them,
yeah,
that's a good
my
thing.
Like, yeah, I only notice them if they stand out in a weird way.
Yes,
not if they're normal. I don't ever think, oh, perfect. Those ears, man. She's got some sexy ass ears.
Yeah, I'm either seeing they're out too far, that's unfortunate, or cauliflower ear, that's gross.
Yeah.
That's about the extent that I'm going with ears. But it's a thing.
Yeah, apparently for Bast. It's a huge thing for him. I also like, though, just the kind of personality that Kelvin has, like at the very beginning of the chapter when he asks him how he feels, and Quothe's like, fine. He's like, good. Boys your age shouldn't worry over such small things. Soon again, you'll be as sound as stone. It's like, over small things. They just whipped him in the university. Split his back open.
I kind of took that as like behavioral type things. That's kind of the way I took it. Like, because again, to me, that kind of speaks to how he doesn't play the politics type thing. He doesn't play but obviously what he did was a big thing too. But I don't know. Like, I guess I kind of took it as not fitting in or, not walking the line, so to speak. But again, that's kind of short-sighted for me to look at it that way, in the sense that malfeasance is no joke.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not... that's not something to be taken lightly.
He's like, are you well, Alir Kvothe? And then the, like, soon again you'll be as sound as stone. I just kind of took that as, like, you're a young man, you'll heal, you'll be fine. Don't, rub some dirt on it. Get some...
Chew some bark.
Yeah. Toss some Robitussin on it. But... It's a
little I mean, I guess I kind of forgot, because you get such a big impression from Kilvin in the small bits, because this is pretty short. I mean, we only get a couple pages of Kilvin, and then, he's with his friends. So it kind of moves on pretty quick, but I do remember when he's in scenes, he's very impactful. The way that Rothfuss writes him carries a lot of weight. Like, you get a lot from him from little bits. Look, the admissions from all of these things. He really stands out through his actions because he's so different than the other masters.
And the audiobook does a masterful job of bringing Kelvin to life. Like, when you when you read it, you like him, but then when you listen to the audiobook, you're like, oh, well, this brings it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's a really good, that would be a great endorsement for the audiobook, is any of the Sealdish, the accent, the guy does so well. I mean, he just does a tremendous job on Kilvin especially, but also Willem, but especially Kilvin. Yeah, he really stands out in the books.
Elodin too, like the way he brings Elodin's, the tone and those kind of things, and the way, the rise and fall of his voice and the inflection, that kind of stuff. Like, he brings Elodin to life as well.
That makes me want to listen to it again, because it's been a while. This read through, I haven't really been listening because I feel like I get more out of the reading, but it does complement really well. And actually, I have to go back to him. I have to turn him on every now and then.
Yeah, it's pretty good. He does a really good job. Like, it's the best audiobook I've ever listen to. There's plenty of good
It's
ones, but he's
yeah.
just seems to be on another level.
Yeah, it's especially because I've listened to a few audiobooks where there will be a chap. So, for example, one of the books that comes to mind, there's the chapters alternate between a man and a woman, and they do have a man and a woman as different narrators performing the audiobook. This is all one guy, and he's fantastic. Like
Yeah.
the way he's able to differentiate the characters is so good, man. Yeah, it's really good. It's quite good.
Yeah, there's other guys I've listened to that are pretty good, but a lot of times it takes me 30 minutes or so to get used to them, and then once I get used to them, then it's like, okay, this is pretty good now. But this guy, like, I can just put it on immediately and just fall straight into the book. I don't notice him. Like, I just notice the characters and that kind of stuff. I'm not thinking about the guy narrating, where other people, like, I think about it when they're doing a girl's voice or whatever. Like, I'm just picturing a guy doing a girl's voice. And so it doesn't, it takes me a little bit of time to get used to their different voices or things like that. They're too over the top with it or different things. It's not subtle enough. This guy, I can just put it on and I don't even think about him being there, other than, when I think back to it, I'm like, yeah, this guy crushed it.
Yeah, the same for me. It was kind of a in retrospect type of situation. But there's been audibles that I've downloaded before where I'm like, I returned it. I'm like, I can't do this.
Yeah,
I can't, like, just certain voices where it's like, I like this book. It was like one of the ones I downloaded. I liked the book a lot, and it's like, I can't listen to this dude. Like, I can't do it. So I just ended up returning it and getting something else.
Yeah,
Luckily,
I've heard like some the British narrators. Some of them are really good and I like, but if they have just a little bit too weird of a British accent, I don't know which part of, what type of British accent it is, but some of them just hit my ear wrong and I cannot do their voice.
Yeah, it's funny. I was trying to picture in my mind what it was about the dude's voice, but I just remember I could get past it, which is kind of strange, again, because it's a book I like a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I've read the book multiple times, and I was just like, I can't do this. Like, they're going to have somebody else read this thing. And then actually, I started to look, when I was looking at books, I'm looking to see, is that guy? So now I'm looking to avoid a certain guy. And he's immensely successful. It's very strange. Like, it's one of the highest rated audibles for a Murakami novel, and I just had to avoid it. Kind of strange, but yeah, everybody's ear is different,
Yeah. And then we get, when they get to the little kind of the bar scene, which is at Anchor's. Yeah. So I don't know if you caught, like, they're having their little dinner or lunch or whatever it is at Anchor's, which is obviously comes into play, as that's where he ends up getting room and board and plays for Anchor after Ambrose screws him out of any other place that he can play at. Anchor's is the one place that he's able to get a little gig at. But
that dude's cool. The guy that runs the joint.
Yeah, I like him.
It's so great. Like, immediately gets so endeared to the guy when he explains like why he would take Kvothe on, and it's great.
Yeah, he's like,
that's not here, but
So I heard about you, and Kvothe's like, all right, well, I'll be on my way. And he's like, well, hold on. It's like, I wouldn't mind sticking it to this prick.
So there's a great line here that I particularly like a lot, just in describing a situation we've all been in many times, or at least, I've definitely been in. We were none of us particularly drunk, but then again, none of us were particularly sober either. Our exact positioning between those 2 points is a matter of pointless conjecture, and I will waste no time on it. I like that. I like this, the idea of, it's something that it's difficult to put your finger on. Plus, it's also like, well, it doesn't really matter, does it? I don't know. I really like that whole paragraph.
Yeah, he's got a number of lines like that where, he switches from telling the story and you're in Kvothe's head at that moment to now it's the narrator talking, like he's talking to Chronicler or Bass, or just talking to the reader directly. and he's got a lot of those little flourishes that he throws in.
You got to be really judicious with that, because you don't want to, break the wall, so to speak.
Yeah.
But he does it. He knows exactly what he's doing. When he walks that line, it works. Like in this particular position, it just, it literally, like, my mind's eye smirks, but you just keep rolling. It's great, and it gives you more of a sense. Anyone who's been in a position like this, it just puts you in your own life experience, and you're there with these guys. So now it is like these guys are your group, it's like Savoy's your buddy, Willem's your buddy,
Yeah. And then you need to figure out who you're going to suck up to. Simmons said a master has to sponsor you to Relar, so you should pick one and stick to him like shit on his shoe. Savoy's like, lovely. I like, this is what solidified me liking Savoy, this little chapter, this little scene with him, because after that, they're telling him, you got to find who you're going to suck up to, and then Savoy's like, I just try to be, brilliant and wait for them to notice. And they're like, well, how's that working out for you? And they get into the story of him getting into it with Mandrake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
you talked about this, I think, last episode or 2 episodes ago.
Yeah.
Like the whole, it's great.
It's like, they're not telling the whole story. He passed me over for promotion in favor of another student. He was keeping me back so he could use me as indentured labor rather than raise me to Relar. And you threatened him with your crop. We had an argument, and I happened to have my crop in my hand. You waved it at him, Willem said. I'd been writing, Savoy said hotly. If I'd been whoring before class and waved a corset at him, no one would have thought twice about it.
I love stories like that where the guy that's they're writing, like, hey man, you did do this, and he's like, well, no, but, and then he explains his side, and you're like, dude, you totally did what they're talking about. Like, yeah. It's so good. And actually, well, now that we talk about it, it reminds me, Wolf of Wall Street, when the character's like, so did you, when DiCaprio asked him, so you didn't marry your cousin, did you? No, it's not like that. It's not like that. And then he explains he married his cousin. but he did it because she, she developed young and all his friends wanted to fuck her. So he was like, I'm going to do it. I'm like, okay. So you totally, but he starts out, no, it's not like that at all. And then explains like 100% like that.
Yeah.
And this definitely like reminds me of that. I love moments like that where it starts to play out. It's great too, especially in a novel, because it's playing out. We don't know where he's going to go with it. We don't know how he's going to defend himself. And then you realize, 100%, they're reading things exactly the way that they happened, and you're explaining it and just telling us exactly how it happened. It's exactly like they thought.
And then the part that made me like him was after they're giving him shit and he's trying to defend himself. And then when he says that last line, and like Simmon, I think, is the one's like, I'm thinking about it twice right now. And then it was Savoy fought down a smile as he turned to face me. So you get like that he's got a little bit of a sense of humor. He's, he can laugh at himself, and he doesn't like, because that could easily go from a situation where he's contesting them and then, gets shitty with them and fucking gets mad like a little baby. But no, he laughs at it too. He can laugh at himself. And so that I can, if you can't laugh at yourself, then I will not like you at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, anybody that takes themselves too seriously, yeah, it's no fun. But and then he takes off to go see some chick and buys them 2 rounds of drinks, which is pretty cool. So again, he's a cool guy,
and kind of a bit of a
little bit of a creep.
Yeah. Fucking grabs the serving girl's ass as he's leaving. Like, dude, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, that's
jackass.
Yeah,
it's like, funny, no, hey, he's, it's different where he's from. Like, okay.
It's so, I love trying to apologize for the dude when it's like, like it's different where he's from. Like, it doesn't he's not there.
Yeah.
And I'm not there. So you just make up for it with a tip. That's how you do it.
It's like, yeah, it's different, Yeah, well, you're not in a strip club. You're at a fucking bar. Keep your hands to yourself, buddy.
I like, so as they go back and forth about, well, it's definitely not going to be him that he can cozy up to. Or since Fitz isn't here, I'll call him Ham. I'll call him Ham Sandwich.
Yeah.
So, since, so obviously it's not going to be him. It's not going to be Lauren. It's not going to be, well, it could be Mandrag, but then he says, but when they have that back and forth, this is again one of those great things that Rothfuss does, where he says, I've got a lot of experience with chemistry. It'd be a small step into alchemy, and then Simon has to correct him and say, everyone thinks chemistry and alchemy are so similar, but they're not. They're not even related. They just happen to live in the same house. And then they kind of just move on, but that plays out again later, where they have a more distinct explanation of the differences between chemistry and alchemy. But I like, he gives you this little piece and it sits in the back of your mind. Then when you get there later, it's like, oh yeah, I remember there was they were trying to make that point that there's a distinct difference between the two.
Yeah,
I just really, as a read through, you get that.
Yeah, they really drive it home when when Simon is making the little chemical that he'll put on his hands to be able to stick his hand in the fire without burning himself. They really make it distinct that it's very different. Kvothe doesn't know what he's talking about on that kind of stuff, because it was like, when Kvothe, he tells Kvothe, you want to be careful. You put it under too much water, it'll catch fire. And he's like, oh yeah, okay, you're having fun with me. And he's like, yeah, how much William bet that that I would fall for all this stuff? And then he shows it to him, and then they have the rest of their dialogue along those lines is Kvothe having to say, I don't know anything about alchemy. Every time
he gets him to admit it.
Yeah, he would say something ridiculous, and Kvothe would just have to just accept it and be like, I know nothing about alchemy. So yeah, they really drive it home in that scene.
I did actually, I skipped over a part that I should mention about anchors that I thought was a really great description, where he's talking about how Savoy sort of sniffed a bit at Will and Sim choosing anchors. But then Kvothe's description's so great, where he says anchors was low class enough so that the drinks were cheap, but high class enough so that you didn't have to worry about someone picking a fight or throwing up on you. I liked it.
Yeah.
To me, I mean, and that also says a lot about Kvothe, because you're getting these little pieces throughout where you're starting to realize a little bit more who he is. And that's one of those distinct things that tells you much more about a person in a way that you can't just point out. You can read through and then find these little different traits, but something about his taste, like what type of company he likes to be in, that type of situation. Yeah, I dug that part of it as well.
Yeah, that's kind of, it seems like a bar that I would go to, because I tend to lean towards either hole in the wall bar with low class bars, or like a cigar bar or something, where it's nicer, but it's not overly, fancy and pretentious.
Yeah.
But I avoid the high class pretentious bars. That's not my scene. That's not my scene at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with Kvothe as well on this, on his description.
We also get in this part where he's talking about, you get the differences between the masters and how you move up, like the different little bit of politics and different bits of, sometimes it's timing, sometimes it's politics. Other guys are very strict and have a regimented course on how you get to move up in the rankings. Like, for example, one of the regimented guys is Arwill at the Medica. He's like, you got a long haul if you go through the Medica. Arwill is stubborn as pig iron. There's no bending him. Made a gesture with his hand as if chopping something into sections while he spoke. 6 terms Alir, 8 terms Relar, 10 terms Eltha. And he's like, at least. Simmons, at least that. Fellas, or Mola's been there for, something around 3 years or something. So, 8 terms, that's 16 months. So that's 2 years. So if Kvothe went with him, it'd take him at least 2 years to move up, where, going with Mandrake had taken on, he's got like 20 students, so he's super crowded, so it would take a while to move up through him. He can't go through him or Brandor. He doesn't want to go through the, learn languages or whatever that the master linguist, the chancellor, would teach. And so he's basically narrowed it down to he's got Elxadal, Kilvin, or Elodin. But you get a nice sense of the university and how things work just through this little part.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because when he thinks it through, we get another piece of what's always in the back of his mind is he tries to think, how could I come up with 6 years worth of tuition? And then he's like, I might not have the patience for that. When in actuality, it's like, dude, I ain't got the money.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have any prospects yet to how he's going to earn some money, how he's going to get some money coming in. So, he's making an economic decision on top of what fits my traits best, So he's being quite practical when it comes down to it. But what I still find really interesting, and this kind of plays out throughout the chapter, it just makes sense. Kilvin is the easiest fit.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's kind of like
but
it's kind of like anything else where it's like, it makes the most sense, but he's still intrigued by Elodin. It's kind of like that girl that you could hook up with, but there's that other one that won't talk to me. She's harder to crack, so I'm gonna go for that.
The challenge.
It kind of reminds me of that. But it's and that's actually the route it goes too. I mean, he ends up approaching Elodin and everything. But it's funny to see the reactions as well to when he brings up Elodin, because they're just like, what are you talking about? He doesn't teach anything.
Yeah.
I love that whole, the whole mystique around him. So interesting.
Yeah. And the last little parts you get on this chapter, the big one's Elodin. You get a lot of good nuggets on Elodin. The other one is you for the first time, we've talked about it a number of times, but you get, for the first time in the book, you hear about Gillers, which are arcantists who stay at the university, and they do a lot of the teaching. So you get a little bit more information on how the university works, and when you graduate and you become an arcanist, what your options are. You can go travel out in the world, or you can stay as a master's giller and work under them, do a lot of the teaching. Probably, if you want to move up and become a master yourself, you probably have to become a giller and work under one of these guys and wait for one of them to retire, and then you kind of fill their shoes after being their, second in command. So you get a little bit of that, how the university works from that. But the big thing you get is you learn Elodin used to be chancellor about 5 years ago. And so he says, as I was saying, Elodin was the youngest ever admitted, youngest to make arcanist, and youngest to be chancellor. Even so, you have to admit, he's a little odd to be chancellor. Not back then, Simmons said soberly. That was before it happened. When nothing was forthcoming, I prompted it. Will shrugged. Something. They do not speak on it. They locked him in the crockery until he got most of his marbles back. So you get a lot on Elodin, and it's very similar to Kvothe. He was a year younger than Kvothe when he got in. So he's the youngest ever, so that shows you how Kvothe was only 15 when he got in. Elodin was the youngest ever at 14. So Kvothe getting in at 15 is one of the youngest ever. And not only did he get in, they paid him to get in. So that's extremely impressive. But then Elodin was able to work his way up very quickly. Mm-hmm. Became an arcanist by 18, I think they say. And then, becomes the youngest ever chancellor. And then something happens that he fucking cracks.
Yeah, we were speculating on that last time, and my note there was I really would like to know what happened in the details, but they they talk about that danger, that risk of every term some kid basically loses his mind.
Yeah.
Right? Or, well, a couple students go crazy,
Yeah.
basically.
And, I mean, it could be that, like we talked about last time, that him and the guy that we're going to be introduced to here in a couple chapters when we get to Elodin, his Giller, that they tried to open the door, they tried to do something, they were trying to discover some type of new magic, some way to get behind the door or something like that, and it put such a strain on them, and they had to go to places that is just not good for you mentally, that it cracked both of them, and just Elodin was able to recover while his Giller is still not recovered from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's a trip. I mean, that changes the whole circumstance for the reader, because now, we're building up how these guys are doing all these impressive things. There's magic involved, the capabilities, what can come of this, and then suddenly we get the risk, and then we start to see real substantiated what those risks are when we walk through the rookery. But I mean, the point of entry through Elodin is so interesting. Like this whole the stats you just mentioned. I love this whole thing about, is it Kamar?
Yeah, whatever.
Just the picture of that guy and the description of this dude that walks around the fishery. That's just a walking warning.
Yeah.
Of like his face is all burnt up and he's got like a freaking a web of scars that radiate out, and an eye patch and bald strips running through his hair and beard. I mean, he just sounds like a character. Like, they make this into a show, that dude's gonna look awesome.
Yeah.
Just like walking through there. But it's to have that that walking example of like, here's the risk, here's what could happen, and to know like he's second in command at the fishery, that's pretty impressive. But then again, he's a walking sign of the risks. It seems, you have to keep it in the back of your mind, and they have these examples of guys that lose their mind every term, but the rookery is a building where all these people are, away from, people aren't seeing them walking around. Yeah. They're not seeing that live threat. So I just remember when it was introduced here, it was like, oh, it gets pretty interesting, where it's like, you're playing with you're taking very significant risks in trying to do these things at the university.
Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, it raises the stakes,
Yeah, there's a lot of danger involved. I mean, from everything from artificery to sympathy, like people tearing their arms off at the socket, trying to lift things with sympathy, which we learn about later on, or the possibility that you could set yourself on fire or kill yourself, drain too much blood. You get the binder's chills, or
I guess
you got people that get cracked and go insane.
Yeah. Well, we also got it. I mean, we got it with your big critique of the
huge hole in the book.
Yeah. Well, we got it there. I mean, he almost died, right? He almost killed himself. So, I mean, we get it there, but it's also kind of a child playing with a gun sort of situation. Where here, these are adults, or, well, to a degree, adults who are cognizant of what they're doing, and they're stretching. I like the example you're giving is they're trying to do something that could be so mentally exhausting that literally cracks them. And yeah, it's really cool how they play that all out by when we get to go through the rookery there in a minute. But I also, again, so kind of going back to how the chapter ends, they basically stamp it. So, or Willem basically is like, okay, all this stuff about Elodin and everything we're talking about, I think we've decided Kilvin, that's the guy you're going to hook up with. That's how this is going to work for you. Agreed? And they all agree. And then, but it ends with, yeah, I'm still thinking Elodin. I mean, he doesn't say it, but he's still yeah, okay, I agree. Or he nods, whatever. But the wheels in my head were spinning. I was thinking about Tavern the Great, knew the names of all things, thought about the stories Scarpia had told back in Tarbean. He hadn't mentioned arcantists, only namers, and again, thinks of Elodin, master namer. How would I approach him? So he just immediately, he's with them, and he sees the sensibility in it. But again, this is kind of one of the things I like about Kvothe. He's pretty careful, and
dreams big.
Yeah, he's measured in what he does, but he's willing to. Yeah, he dreams big. That's a good example here. But he also takes risks. This isn't as much as a. Well, I guess it's in a way it's a risk because Kilvin's the easy path.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, that's one of the qualities about Kvothe that's appealing.
The only other thing I had on the chapter is I think I find the timing to be a little interesting. So Elodin was Chancellor about 5 years ago. He was locked in the rookery for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that means he got out of the rookery about 3 years ago, which is 3 years ago was when the Chandrian killed Kvothe's family too. So about the time he was getting out of the rookery and freeing himself, Kvothe was having his life completely upended, and so it's kind of interesting. As I don't think there's, I haven't seen anything that makes me think these two events are connected in any way, but it's just kind of interesting on at a time where Kvothe was going to get cracked, Elodin was coming out of being cracked.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't made the connection, but yeah, that is interesting. And it is just the idea of Elodin being Chancellor just doesn't seem when you read it, you're like, it just kind of. I mean, in the back of your mind, you know it when you've read through the books already, but it is kind of a reminder where it's like, oh yeah, I personally forgot about that. Just I mean, I know how powerful he is and everything else, but it just doesn't seem to be something that would fit him. Like to be in a leadership role simply because, we read him teaching classes. And it's like, man, he's not dumbing things down for people, I guess.
Nah, he's got that Bobby Fischer type of thing going where, prodigy that was just wrecking people in chess. And then eventually, Bobby Fischer cracked. He never really came back from it, but he just kept getting stranger and stranger. But that prodigy that eventually kind of loses his mind. It's a common theme. Prodigies, for whatever reason, it seems like they struggle to adjust once they get a little bit older and they're no longer a prodigy anymore. And so then, like, people catch up to you, and your peers are on a similar footing. It's not like these prodigies just keep rocketing up and it never stops. Eventually they hit their fucking limit, and their limit is not much higher than other smart people's limits. It's just they got there sooner, so they eventually lose that prodigy status, and then they have a tough time dealing with, being among peers because they're not used to it. Yeah. They're not used to not being,
have trouble adjusting. That's, there's my mind immediately went to like schizophrenics because they tend to be ahead, in so many traits, and then they peak, and then once they peak, socially a lot of times it's just, there's no going back to being able to be integrated into normal society.
No, yeah, you see it all the time. Like, there's a ton of stories of chess players that just lose their mind. I mean, that were just brilliant, amazing chess players at a young age, and then just completely lose their mind. There's something about that ability that prodigy ability seems to strain people's mind quite a bit, or that people with strained minds are the ones that are likely to be prodigies to begin with. So they're, it doesn't have to be that one leads to the other. It could be the other way around.
They're pushing themselves to the limit, so they're able to accomplish more than others.
Yeah.
But then that strain eventually wears them thin.
Yeah, or they were just destined to break at some point, but they were only able to contain it while they were young. But
but you're one of the rare ones that just consistently goes higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's,
you haven't broken yet.
No, my biggest struggle is trying to dumb everything down. That's the biggest struggle. Is like trying to bring it down to everybody else's level and get down on the ground with everybody else, while knowing you could be up in these heights, but it's lonely at the top. So You just got to bring everything down. I think that's how I keep myself leveled out and I don't crack, is that, I bring myself down to, like, I hang out with people like at your level.
Well, the good news is you have so much humility. That's probably what holds you down, right?
I'm so humble.
It's
amazing
it's
how
the
humble I
humility.
am.
Yeah. Well,
Definitely.
we're all in awe of how
way
humble
more
you
humble,
are.
way more humble than anybody else I've ever met.
That sounds about right.
Everybody talks about how humble I am.
Yeah. Behind your back only, though. No one's telling you to your face.
No, I make sure I bring it up to everybody's face. Let them know how humble I am.
That is such a very virtuous trait.
Always a great line, is to tell someone, I'm a very humble person. Like,
yes,
you're clearly not.
I remember going. Not. Yeah, I remember going to the break room at work once, and this woman's just like, I heard her 5 times say to different groups of people. She had just like written a big trade or something. I heard her say five different times to different groups of people how humble she is. I'm like, dude, what the? None of them are walking away thinking you're humble, and I'm certainly not. Like, what the fuck? Just give her a badge that she gets to wear on her chest, the humility badge. And it's like really bright and big. It's like, flowing, and there's, it's like gold plated. It really needs to be big, really ostentatious.
That's actually a great merch idea, is a very ostentatious humility shirt.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I like that. That's a good necklace. Massive medallion.
I'm more humble
out there
than you.
Should have that. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I like it.
Yes. Got another shirt for you guys.
Well, that's all I have on that chapter.
All right, chapter 45 is titled Interlude, Some Tavern Tale. It's a quick interlude. Bass asks him why he didn't go looking for Scarpy. Kvothe gives his reasonings why, and it leads right into the next chapter where he meets Elodin. So this is one of the... There's not a lot to this. It seems almost unnecessary. The only little part you get out of it is kind of building on that this is a different type of story than just the typical fantasy story that you read.
Yeah, I kind of feel like he uses Bast on a number of occasions to ask the question that the reader's asking. Why didn't you go find Ben? Why didn't you go find Scarpy? Why didn't you do what is a logical thing for you to be doing? And basically his answer is, it's more complicated than normal stories. I made enemies. I'm poor, and I have an unquenched desire to learn the name of the wind. It seems that's basically his reasoning. When it's funny because he says, there's no mad hermit in the woods for me. Well, it seems like Elodin's that mad hermit in the woods. But yeah, it's you almost feel like Kvothe gets like a little bit frustrated, or I guess it is still Kvothe in this scene or in this chapter. But he's basically like, most stories they would be like this. This is much more complicated because it's my story. But then you kind of see parallels to where, because he's done that in the past, where he's like, but this, when he tells an example of a story, it's like, well, isn't that what happens? Isn't that what happens in your story as well? And we don't know, obviously, but finds the villains and kills them, maybe. But it's kind of, it's page and a half, so it's super short, but it felt like more than anything to me, it's to wrap that up for the reader, where it's like, why wouldn't he just go get Scarpy?
Yeah, and I like that. The aspect of it I like is it shows kind of what Rothfuss is trying to do with the whole book, and that there's aspects of it that are very much a fantasy trope, but also he's subverting fantasy tropes. So he kind of walks that thin line of, he keeps it in that mode of where it's similar to the story you would expect it to be, but also subverting it in many different ways. And so this is kind of like that perfect example where he's like, the fantasy trope would be, You go meet the hermit in the woods. He teaches you these magical powers. Then you use these magical powers to go kill the Chandrian. And so that's not exactly what happens, but it's very similar to what happens. He does learn some, crazy magic from Elodin, and he is going to use those more than likely to go fight the Chandrian, but it just happens in a different way. So he does the trope, but he subverts it and does it differently. And he spells it out cool. In this chapter.
Yeah, and I mean, it does. I mean, that's, for me, that's what I need. That's what I want. It makes it a much more interesting story to begin with. And that speaks to, you could call it a flawed character. It's a realistic character. It's much more realistic. I mean, there's so many things about Kvothe that aren't realistic at all, but there's so many things that are, and that's what draws in the reader is, those realistic traits that pulled down. Well, it's kind of like you, right? It's those realistic traits that where he's subverting how outstanding and excellent he is to walk amongst others, the unwashed apes of the world, which is everyone but Kvothe.
Yep, I'm very much like him. Totally agree. But I like that because the problem with subverting fantasy tropes is they're tropes for a reason. They work, and you don't want to just throw them out, but you also don't want to just do the same thing everybody else has done, and that's why Rothfuss, I think, his books are so good, is that they leave in the elements that make a story great. Like, you don't want to read a story about some boring, mundane, average guy. You want like a badass, like a Kvothe that's extremely smart, unbelievably talented, like a superior person. You want that, but you also don't want it just to be the same exact. He runs into a problem and he solves it with his mastery, and you don't want the same story you've heard a million times, but you want a lot of those themes, but you just want to do it in a new and interesting way, and he definitely does.
I mean, it's so interesting to hold him back with things that we all deal with. He's got self-esteem issues. He's got, abandonment. Well, I guess abandonment issues, which still self-esteem. And he's impoverished, right? So, I mean, those are the things that sort of hold him down. He's still excellent and outstanding and extraordinarily talented and has all these capabilities. But then he's held down by, his past, and his present entire being. But, he kind of breaks through those barriers slowly but surely. But then he fucks himself up with Ambrose.
Yeah.
And he, makes these mistakes along the way. So, we grow with him, which, it's just, that's why it's such an interesting story.
Yeah. And then we move into chapter 46, which is titled The Ever-Changing Wind. And this chapter, he goes to Elodin and tries to get him to teach him, and Elodin does everything in his power to convince Kvothe not to, hitch his wagon to him, tries to convince him that he shouldn't try to look to Elodin to be a teacher. He doesn't want to do it. And he takes him to the rookery, and he sees what the dangers of learning naming can be, what can happen to your mind. And eventually the great scene with him jumping out the window and falling and screwing himself up and realizing that maybe learning from Elodin is not the greatest thing.
Yeah, I mean, this chapter is so great. This chapter sort of sets the path for the way I see Elodin through the rest of the books. Just how kind of unpredictable he is, how childlike he is, and but also how brilliant he is at the same time. It's really, really interesting. The more I've reading through this again on this read through, I'm picking up little things where I'm like, is he trying to teach him here? Because he's trying to he's telling him no. He continuously telling him no in so many different ways. But then at the same time, I'm kind of wondering, is there a subtlety to what he's doing and trying to hint along the way how it works, how naming in itself works, and then he shows him something that's I don't even know how to describe it. It's Taborlin the Great. I mean, it's magic to the largest degree that Kvothe's ever seen or ever will see, other than his own abilities. Right? I mean, it's world changing. So yeah, I mean, it's tremendous. But I like well, just starting out, I like that Elodin teaches unlikely maths.
Yeah.
And his when and where, time is the when is now and the location is everywhere.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great that's a perfect description of Elodin. Like, just basically gives everybody a middle finger in the ledger when they look for what class he's teaching. It's unlikely maths. Well, and then even lessons everywhere.
I guess even if you consider the whole first part of the chapter could be looked at as a metaphor, as like an extended metaphor for naming, right? Because he's being elusive. He's not answering his questions directly. He's even walking away from him. He's giving him tasks that have nothing to do with what he's trying to do. So in a way, it's kind of like the whole thing is kind of an extended metaphor for what he eventually does in his class. Right? Because he doesn't, he demonstrates, he doesn't instruct. Right?
Yeah, I mean, he's basically like, he gives them, so there's plenty, he's basically, there's plenty math to be learned in the world. All you got to do is be looking for it and trying to figure it out on yourself. But he's basically like, go figure it out on yourself. Don't waste my time. Don't come to me for this shit. Go figure it out.
Well, then,
if you can't figure it out, too fucking bad.
Well, then he even goes as far as like offending him. He's like, what's it going to take to get you to leave? And then calls him Ravel. He insults the Ademaru, says they're unteachable. Like, and he just goes directly at him to try to get him to just like, dude, leave me alone, bro.
I like right before that too, when he first gets up to him and he says he'd like to learn under him. I was hoping to ask you a question or something like that. He's like, sad little hope, he said without breaking stride or looking in my direction. You should aim higher. A young man ought to be a fire with high ambitions. I hope to study naming, I said, falling into step beside him. Too high, he said matter-of-factly. Try again. Somewhere in between. It's fucking great.
Yeah.
And then sends him to go find 3 pine cones when Kvothe goes looking for him, and he's looking for the exact right pine cones and comes back, and Elodin's already walked off and just sent him on a stupid errand.
Literally a fool's errand. With him. Yeah. That's pretty great. Yeah, it's I mean, just the whole intro. So again, I mean, throughout the chapter, it really tells you who the guy is, right? And just the way he's written him, so interesting, because I keep when you picture him, I keep seeing him like with these very serious masters, sitting there during the admissions, and he's just like giggling, not really paying attention. He's kind of smiling. He's just fucking around. The dude's he seems to never be serious, yet he commands more respect from all the masters than anyone, and apparently fear. It seems there's like an underlying fear to when he speaks, when he gets involved, and he seems like he's kind of like a loaded gun. Like
he's dangerous. He's very powerful, and he's wild.
Well, and then especially
he's unpredictable.
And then when you take into account whatever happened that they don't speak of, whatever did happen, and the fact that, he seemingly is the most powerful person in some way, because it's hard to gauge power in their world, but one of the most powerful people at the university, they all know it, and then the guy loses his mind for a while. And then breaks out of the...
when you think about, he was chancellor, and then they had to lock him away, and they locked him in some room that they thought he couldn't get out of, and then he eventually got out of it. Yeah. Did something that all the masters tried to prevent him from being able to escape. They wanted to lock him away for who knows how long, maybe forever, and he eventually gained some magical power that they can't prevent, that they could not keep him locked away. And it seems like none of them would be able to get out of that that bind. So you would assume they created a situation that they couldn't escape, but he did.
Yeah,
And
that's
now
really...
he can just go in there and fucking get out. Even when they change little things, he can get out immediately.
It's really interesting to consider because in a way it's like they can't control him. So it's like he kind of does what he wants, right? Because, well, they can't really control him. They tried.
Yeah.
And, I especially like that little moment where, and we're getting ahead, but it's fine, where Kvothe is like, what would happen if I just left, shut the door?
Yeah.
Because he's like, would I be doing everyone a favor? Because, he put the sock there, right? Or something. He put something to keep the door open.
He put his sock, wedged it in between in the door.
And he's like, what if I just ran out and closed this thing and left him in here,
Turns out it wouldn't have stopped him at all. It took him looking at this wall for like 30 seconds to be able to piece out what they changed and to be able to completely destroy it.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, so, because we learn through Kvothe how difficult it is to really be able to do these things like naming the wind and then have actual mastery over it and control over it. He gets ever closer, right? But Elodin got out of this room and now he's second time around and he's able to do it. And it's not effortless, but it damn near. Right? And he's even like chuckles to himself like, oh, you changed something. Okay.
Yeah.
And he still has to.
Cute. It's cute. It's cute what you guys did.
Yeah. But and he does even have to actually use like actual physical breaking of things to get out of it, but he still gets out of it.
Yeah. And then you get him going and agreeing to answer 3 questions for Kvothe. And the first one was, why don't you want to teach me? And I love what you were talking about where he just starts shitting on the Ademaru. Because the Ademaru make exceptionally poor students. They are fine for rote learning, but the study of naming requires a level of dedication that ravels such as yourself rarely possess. Then
I love it. Yeah, he immediately... Okay, go ahead.
He's like, I'm sorry that your experience with the Rue has left something to be desired, I said carefully. Let me assure you that, ye gods, a bootlicker too? You lack the requisite spine and testicular fortitude to study under me.
I love it, man. So, yeah, slanderize who he is as a person, basically, like, whatever, slanderize him in that way. And then whatever his response is, use that against him. And then you're not tall enough. Your eyes are too green. You have the wrong number of fingers. Come back when you're taller and you found a decent pair of eyes. It's like things that you have no control over. Yeah. It's fucking hilarious, man. Where it's just like, yeah, forget it, dude. Whatever reasons you need, that's the reason.
Yeah, it's fucking great. And he's like, fine, I'll show you why. So he takes him to Haven, where the University Asylum, also called the Rookery or the Crockery. And you learn a little bit about how dangerous naming can be, or at least even maybe sympathy or just magic in general can be, because they have 320 to 350 patients, and they could hold 500 plus patients, and there's only about 1,500 students in the university, at the current time. So there's basically almost a quarter of the people that are at the university are fucking cracked. Now, obviously, there's people that are graduating that are leaving, so it's not, 20%, 15, 20% are not going cracked, but a good number go cracked and probably stay cracked.
Yeah, well, and it does seem standard, right? This is normal. Like they're used to this. This is a normal circumstance, and that was kind of already laid out when they talked about, multiple people cracking. And these are, again, you have to go through admissions to get in the university in the first place. So these aren't like, just random people that are cracking. These are very, very smart and able individuals. So, this is no joke.
Yeah, they're ready for it. They got a place that can hold a shit ton of them. I'm curious, like, how many recover and how long it's taken them to build up to 320, 350? Is it like, that's the standard number, and then for every one that goes cracked, another one recovers, and so it's just kind of maintaining at that level? Or are these people, for the most part, just going cracked and staying cracked?
Yeah, that's a good question. It definitely brings that question into mind. But I guess we kind of don't really get resolution there. I mean, we know with Elodin, obviously, some people come back, but
yeah,
and
he came back different. Or like Ari,
yeah.
She's cracked, but she's clearly got enough of herself together where she can survive in that state. She's just kind of different, but
Yeah.
she's recovered enough. But it doesn't seem like when you go fucking, you lose your mind, that you're going to come back to being normal again. Like, you're not going to come back to who you were before you fucking lost your shit.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like you get a reset button.
No.
You're gonna be a different version of yourself. It's interesting because I wonder if in Elodin's case, it seems like it's given him greater ability. I mean, he has a sense of humor about when he was cracked.
Yeah.
He kind of jokes about it. I don't remember the exact line, but it's kind of like when he's in the room, he's like, good times. I used to stare out that window for, and he's just kind of like, he kind of makes light of it, which, that's endearing in terms of his character. It makes me like him further. But again, I mean, this chapter is huge on him and the way that I see him. Kind of we skipped over it's kind of small, but I just like these little traits where when they were heading there, while he's strolling along, he's picking up stones and tossing them into trees. He jumps to snatch leaves from low-hanging branches. And like, I love these little touches. His master robe's billowing ridiculously. You always have these mentions of like, he looks ridiculous, like walking around his master's robes. But I also like at one point he stopped and stood motionless and intent for nearly half an hour, staring at a fern swaying slowly in the wind. It's those types of things where like he sits on a bridge and just stares. It's those types of things where it feels like that's where the naming comes from.
It seems like his sleeping mind is more at the forefront than for most people. Like, what he describes as a sleeping mind, it seems like the sleeping mind has a greater grasp of the steering wheel than for most people.
Well, and it feels like, it's almost like Neo with the Matrix, right? You see it when you're not. But but then it kind of brings to mind for me, like when he walks around looking ridiculous, it's almost like when Kvothe has the plumb bob. It's just, you don't have a recognition. Or in Elodin's case, it just seems like he's not a guy of a shit what he looks like. No. He just doesn't care.
No.
And there's no reason to waste your time on it. And if you were wasting your time on it, then your sleeping mind's not awake anyway, because you're focusing on surface level bullshit that doesn't really matter. At least not in his case, right? For other people, it matters. Yeah. People walk around all day giving a shit what other people think about them.
No, he definitely doesn't. He does not care about that shit at all. He seems to be above it all, and it seems like that his sleeping mind, or however you would describe it, is running the show for him more than other people. He's more attuned to it. He's more aware of it than most people are. And that's him trying to teach Kvothe. Is obviously a large part of that, is trying to, wake up that sleeping mind, make him more aware of it, make him more attuned to that side of things without also fucking destroying him.
That's one of the things that I've appreciated much more in this read through than I had in the past, at least more consciously appreciated, is what Elodin's trying to get Kvothe to do, and the little bits that Kvothe is starting to see, but really sees clearly when he's with the Adem. And when he's living with them and he's going through what they do, they're, like the little tests they do where it's like, answer the question immediately, don't think about it. It's like when he starts to pick up what Elodin was giving him, and then he gets real mastery over the name of the wind and things. It's that delicate sort of, that sleeping mind. It's that
I don't know. I still have trouble grasping how to describe it. I guess just calling it the sleeping mind is what you can call it, but it feels almost like, yeah, like the Matrix, or, just this quality
Your subconscious.
between, but it's like the subconscious is in tune with this quality amongst things. It's your chi. I keep going to that because I don't know what else to call it, but I love it. It's a hard thing to nail down, to even explain. I'm having trouble even trying to give details from a book that's what he's doing overarching through the books.
Yeah, and I think that's why it works, is you don't want, if you try to explain it, you pin it down, and
subtlety.
It's exactly like this, then you lose what makes it interesting.
Well, and
what makes it interesting is the fact that you can't really fucking pin it down.
Yeah.
It's not exactly right. It's kind of like sympathy is very mechanical and there's that type of magic where it works because of XYZ. You have to do this, this, and this. Here's the measurements and all this. So that's why sympathy works. And then the naming is more like the Force before they brought in the midichlorians and all that. Like that, when they brought in like midichlorians and all that kind of stuff, that didn't improve things. It made it worse. It worked better when it was this in between thing that you can't really exactly explain. You got to kind of feel it.
Well, that's
it's better that way.
And what Rothfuss, what he's doing that I think is so smart, is using like the wind. Is he using the leaves passing over the cobblestones? He's using, these subtleties that we're aware of, that we can attribute to something that's not easy to understand, but then you can make connections to other planes of existence, I guess. I don't know. I like it. It's great, and it's very artfully done and intelligently done, because he isn't trying to create something concrete. If you tried to create something concrete from it, it defeats the purpose. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
And shatter the whole framework.
Yeah.
But so speaking
it wouldn't work as well.
So speaking to Elodin again, what I was saying earlier about, I just love these parts because I picture him in this way throughout. As he runs for a few steps, stops. He has his shoes on. Or no, he doesn't have his shoes on. He's just in socks, like gliding across a marble floor like a child, man. Like just running around. And again, his master robe's streaming out behind him, and he just keeps doing it. And he does it throughout, pages where he's like step, 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 slide. It's just, it's funny, man, because at the same time they're in a very, very serious place, and he's acting like a child. It's
I love that stuff, because I still, even to this day, like if I'm at the grocery store when I'm going to my car, like I run with the cart and step on the back of it and glide all the way to my car. I still do that. I'm still like a little fucking kid in those moments, and Elodin's definitely like that. Also, too, before finish up on that point, we get a little nugget that when he talks to the girl at the desk or whatever, he's like, she tells him, "They're too wild today, sir. We think there's a storm coming in." She pulled a ledger book off the shelf. "The moon's getting full too. You know how it gets." So there's always these aspects of the moon being full or being completely gone that, for people who are attuned to that sort of thing, it seems to have a major impact. Like Ari, obviously, major. She's either very scared of the moon, doesn't like to go out on top of things when there's a full moon. She tries to hide from it, or there's major aspects to the moon in this story. We don't exactly know what's going on, but it has a significant impact for people who are attuned to naming and shaping and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it seems to set off their psychosis or something. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. But then as far as like him doing his little step, slide, there's the great part where he's like, you're trying to get me to answer questions you're not asking, Sly. It's not going to work. You're trying to trick me into, and Kvothe, you're trying to trick me into asking questions. It seems only fair. Step, 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 slide. So why the hell are you bothering with me anyway? Elodin asked. Kilvin likes you well enough. Why not hitch your star to his wagon? I think you know things I can't learn anywhere else. Things like what? Things I've wanted to know since I first saw someone call the name of the wind. The name of the wind, was it? Elodin raised his eyebrows. Step, 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 step. That's tricky. And you get a little hint that the name of the wind is more difficult than learning the names of other things like stone and iron and that kind of thing. Like he talks about it later on, that learning the name of the wind was the traditional route, the first thing most people would go looking for, but also very difficult because it is ever changing. And he talks about another scene where Kvothe's like, asking him about how he's able to know the name of the wind. He's like, I can see it, I can go anywhere and I can see it, but it's different in different places. But I know how to tip my mind to be able to see the name of the wind no matter where I'm at. But it's ever changing.
Yeah, that's I forget that many times. I kind of forget that. But yeah, I guess that's a big deal that he started with that, and it seems like that would make sense that if they would start with that, it would make it easier to accomplish other. I guess that's kind of similar with anything. Once you've learned the ability to go there with something, then others would seem more attainable, I would imagine.
Yeah, it seemed, and obviously Kvothe learns the name of many different things, because they talk about in the second book, like he had rings on both hands for the different things that he knew, like fire and wind and all these different things. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up on exactly what he learned the name of. But he had rings on both hands. And remember, like when Fella initially started to hold her hand out to put the ring on one of her fingers, he's like, no, not that hand. It's like, you're not anywhere near ready for that. Kvothe had rings on both hands. So he learns a very high degree of mastery of naming. Third book.
I don't remember that. Is that at the end of book 2?
It's in book 2. It comes up in an interlude when he's trying to convince Aaron, I believe, not to join the army, and so he tells him, I'm Kvothe, and if you stay here, I'll tell you my story, and I'll tell you things you've never heard before. And Aaron's like,
he doesn't believe him.
He's like, can you show me your rings? I was like, you had, and then they list out, he had the rings on this hand and this hand, and so he's like asking him, can you show me your rings or your cloak of many colors and that kind of stuff. So it's in that chapter. It's in the second book. Obviously, when we get there, I'll have a bunch to say on that, but just kind of bringing it up here, like Kvothe, obviously, he gets a very good mastery of naming, possibly shaping, that he doesn't have yet, but he's going to get there. That's our biggest clue, that he gets there.
So one of the interesting things that Rothfuss does in this chapter is to bring in this dude Timothy, because
what a douchey name.
I think it's important. I think it does its work. He's not important, obviously, but the utility of that character is important because Elodin's doing what he's doing. He's sliding around, whatever, he's talking, but then he immediately starts ordering people around, and they immediately do his bidding. So again, it kind of brings you back to where it's like, remember, this dude's like Chancellor, or was, right? So this guy, whatever he says, people do. I really found it interesting, and it took me in a different direction when he tries to open the door, and he's like, you locked him in? So just the idea that this guy's not supposed to be locked in. Again, I don't know the word for it, but so he's not committed. He's committed himself.
Well, it seems like if the other masters had their way, mm-hmm. they probably would lock these people up. But Elodin was put in that situation where he was locked up, so he's got and he's especially against it. It seems like Elodin believes that he knows a better way to help these people than what, the people running the asylum think should be done. Seems like there's a disconnect between that.
Well, to me, what that does hint is that a lot of these people in there, they're there because they think this is the best thing for them, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just roaming around free, because they if they're cracked and they're not handling the pressures, then they're there for their own reasons as well as whatever initially got them there.
Yeah, and you get the sense that some of them probably are there against their will, and they got people strapped to beds.
Yeah.
There's the fear that Ari's clearly fearful of going to Haven, and Elodin is not bringing her there, even though he knows of her existence. He knows that Haven is right for some people and not for others. But it seems like other people would just, if you're insane, they would just lock you up, and so they wouldn't consider that there's better ways to handle the situation. They just prefer to kind of lock you up, put you out of their mind.
Yeah. Well, and the way it plays out with this Alder Wen is, it's pretty sad. Just hearing the guy talk and how he was doing okay, but now he's just and it's just a dude in a room, man. It doesn't, you can't see any forces around him, obviously. I mean, if you're just looking on a surface level, it's this is a guy in a room. I don't know what's going on with him, but he's broken.
Yeah, terrified, hiding on the floor, is not willing to leave that place. And he was a full-fledged arcanist.
But he was
not just some fucking chump.
Well,
this is a guy that had already gone through the school.
Well, he
was Elodin's Giller.
Yeah, I was going to say, so he wasn't just, he was the upper echelon, and now he's just, he's, we call it, he's a mess.
Yeah, and you would assume if he was Elodin's Giller, the assumption I have is that they probably went cracked around the same time. It's just Elodin has recovered where this guy hasn't, because I'd be surprised if Elodin took on a Giller after he already fucking became cracked and then, spent 2 years in Haven and then came out and then took on a Giller. It doesn't seem like he's on that path. It's possible. It could be that, but it seems like it would make more sense if they did something that fucked them both up. It's just Elodin was able to handle it better than this guy.
Yeah, I think that does seem to make more sense. I would assume. Yeah, that seems to make more sense. I was wondering about it's hard to tell with these guys what's real, what's not real. But when he asks him if he wants him to bring him anything, it's don't bring thunder. And he's being dead serious, but I do need a cat whistle and blue down and bones too. Tent bones. Elodin just says, I'll bring them. I'm wondering if that's all just figmented imagination stuff, or if those are actual things that can solve a problem for this dude. You know what I mean? Could be. I mean, you never know with Rothfuss. I've not seen anything that would explain it in a way that I would understand, why those things are significant. I don't think there's, unless I missed something. Well, I love that all three
I don't know what they would bring up.
Well, I love that all three are not things. A cat whistle, blue down, there's eider down, there's goose down, but a color, blue down, and then tent bones. It's just, okay.
Yeah.
He's going to build a tent where he can get cats to come to him, and it's soft and blue, apparently. That's all my mind's able to conjure out of that. But
I mean, it could be something, but with Ari, she seems to have an ability to look at things, find things, and know where they should go, what their proper place is, what their proper use is. So it could be that these guys, even in their cracked state, that they have some abilities and they're in touch with things that other people can't understand, where they're seeing things that other people can't see and can't quite grasp, but they have some kind of knowledge. If you could translate what they're trying to tell you, you could probably learn some valuable information. I'm sure that's the case with a lot of them, but I don't know just off those things if they are going to relate to the third book or how they would relate to anything we've read so far.
Well, I mean, what it does do is the same thing that, we're with Kvothe here, and Kvothe's trying to figure out, like, what kind of is going on, how different students can get to this state, and then we get the horrific, like the worst example of, like, if you were to lose your mind and then be in a constant state of they're in me, that whole, oh Jesus, dude, like that's one of the moments that every single time I read it, I hear the audible every time.
Yeah,
just like with what's his face, Trappist, because it's so, like, it's one of those things where the audible does definitely bring something to it, because to hear it the way that he's just screaming it in absolute anguished horror, and then just trying to imagine, like, that's this guy's day every day. He probably screams like this until he's so exhausted he can't anymore, passes out, then wakes back up, and then eventually gets back to this.
Yeah, Elodin actually, he does a great job of demonstrating why Kvothe's not ready. Because when he asks him, like, he's like, all right, tell me why. And he's like, when knew what he was getting into when he became my Giller. He turned and began to walk down the hall. You don't know anything about the university, about the risk involved. You think this place is a fairyland. It's a playground. It's not. That's right, I snapped. It's a playground, and all of the children are jealous because I got to play, get whipped bloody, and banned from the archives, and they didn't. Elodin stopped walking and turned and looked at me. Fine, prove me wrong. Prove me that you thought this through. Why does a university with under 1,500 students need an asylum the size of the royal palace? My mind raced. Most students are from well-to-do families, I said. They've led easy lives when forced to. Wrong, Elodin said dismissively, turning to walk down the hall. It's because of what we study, because of the way we train our minds to move. So ciphering and grammar make people crazy? I said, taking care to phrase it as a statement. Elodin stopped walking and wrenched open the nearest door. Panic screaming burst in the hallway. In me! They're in me! They're in me! They're in me! Through the open door, I could see a young man thrashing against leather restraints that bound him to the bed at wrist, waist, neck, and ankle. Trigonometry and diagram logic don't do this, Elodin said, looking me in the eye. So you get that Kvothe's very naive, and you also get that what Elodin has trained his mind to do and what some of these guys are doing is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
That you can just fucking snap and go insane, where you have to be restrained by your wrist, waist, neck, and ankle.
Well, and it's
like, I mean, they got that dude just strapped to a bed, can't move anything, just screaming, they're in me, over and over and over again.
Well, and it's one thing to have us see Alder win and what state he's in, and it's sad, and that would be a terrible place to be in. This is way worse. I mean, this is torture, and he's torturing himself. He thinks something's inside him, and he's just losing it. Oh man, that's it definitely takes the danger up a notch, or the potential for danger up a few notches to consider that.
Yeah. Like I can't think of much worse than being strapped to a bed where I can't move, I can't get up. Like, that would drive me crazy. But the fact that this guy has been driven so crazy that that's the only way to prevent him from doing
probably ripping his own skin off
to himself. Yeah, like probably doing some massive damage to himself. Like, it shows you, like, this shit's no joke. These people are not just, it's what they're doing is very dangerous. There's a lot of danger to it.
Well, and it's very effective what Rothfuss is doing here, because it's one of those things that I think most people rarely consider the possibility of losing one's mind, losing control of one's mind, and then trapping yourself in just endless thoughts of it's hard even to describe, of just you're being tortured by your own existence. and to be stuck in that as a continuation of. I mean, because again, you have to imagine this dude is literally probably screaming like that until his body can't take it anymore and he has to pass out.
Yeah, and does he ever recover? Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like if
And what
he
took
doesn't
him? What
recover, it's almost just like just put the dude out of his misery.
I mean, it brings up so many questions because, okay, so what got him there, and then what are all the things that could have got him there? I mean, I love stuff like that because there's so much to consider of what that could mean, you know. And again,
you get a sense of it. You get a sense of it when he meets Valerian, and his mind starts to go a little bit love crazy with her, and he has to cordon that part of his mind off just to kind of maintain his sanity. It shows you like a semblance of this, how you're driven insane, where like that part of his mind just went crazy.
Yeah.
Writing love stories about her, and he just had to cordon that part of his mind off in order to stave off becoming insane.
Well, and to a great degree, I think seeing this probably had an influence there. And he knows the stories about people that meet Flora and they don't come back. They don't come back physically or mentally. They never come back. And he goes in there with a careful, measured. I mean, as soon as it starts to happen, he protects himself, and he doesn't allow himself to go fully. He allows a piece of his mind to go nuts and write love songs for her, but the rest of his mind, he is very guarded, and he's constantly keeping himself checked backward, which is really interesting because he willingly just says screw it and goes with no hesitation. But then as soon as he gets there, he's like, okay, I know what I got myself into here. Let me be careful. It's a really interesting dichotomy within him as a character in that sense. But that's what I was saying earlier. That's one of the things I like about him so much is he's very careful, he's very measured, and he's learned that he has to be that way. But then at the same time, he'll just say screw it and take big risks.
Yeah, he'll dream big.
Which is pretty great.
For sure, he's not gonna back down. The part I love about this chapter is when they do get to Elodin's old cage, and there's a couple things about it. Like, one is the door is made entirely out of copper. The walls have copper interweaved in throughout, which seems like that's a new aspect. The windows have copper weaved throughout, so there's got to be clearly. There's something about copper and the ability to naming that it hampers your ability to name, or you just can't name copper. There's something to do with copper naming. I don't know exactly what, but there's got to be. It's so prevalent that there's something different about copper.
It seems like what he's suggesting is that virtually no one has control over it. Right, so whenever they utilize it, wherever it's used in locks, right? It's used on this door, like you said. It's what he eventually has to break down with the part of the chair. So they apparently don't have control over copper for whatever reason. I love how he describes the air. Yeah, how the air is different. Like, so I don't know what that means.
I think what they're trying to say there is, Elodin obviously knows the name of the wind, so they had to create something that would prevent him from being able to call the name of the wind in the room.
Yeah, but
I don't know, some kind of wards that prevented him from having access to the name of the wind and to having access to the wind. So, like, because he even talked about it, he's like, to be able to look out and see the wind, but not be able to feel it against your skin. So I think there's some kind of ward or some kind of magic that they put in the room where it's not actual air in that room. Yeah. It's something different.
I love the way he describes it. It's so great. It was almost like there was a pressure on my ears as if I were deep underwater, except of course that I wasn't. I waved a hand in front of me, almost expecting the air to feel different, thicker. It didn't. And then Elodin's pretty irritating, huh? And he's like, I'm surprised you noticed, actually. Not many do. Which is really, again, that's a big compliment to Kvothe, that he's perceptive to these things. But yeah, the way he describes it, it's really interesting because, well, I've never been in a space other than underwater. Of course, he has to take it there because where have any of us been where we're in a space where the air is different? You know, it almost like the only thing I can kind of think of is when you're on an airplane or when you're driving and suddenly the pressure change. It's the only thing that I could kind of think of where it is kind of like, or almost like a deja vu type situation where you're just like, you're cognizant of the space right now and you don't know why, you know? But yeah, that was really interesting. And it does take it to another level about how they're able to control the circumstances to prevent someone with powers such as Elodin from being able to control the area. And it's really fascinating.
I mean, to prevent, and shows you kind of, probably what aspect, if you know the name of the wind, what you could do with it, because obviously their fear was that if he was able to call the name of the wind in that room, he would have been able to escape. So, maybe you could use it like a tornado to break down the wall or something like that. So clearly you can do some crazy shit with the name of the wind if you have access to it, to the point where they don't even want to have you, if you're trying to lock a namer in a room, you want to make sure he has no access to the name of the wind because he can use it to escape. It's a solid stone room.
So, I'm getting way, way ahead, but I don't give a shit. Just imagine what Kvothe could do in battling the Chandrian with Elodin at his side. I mean, fuck, man. Yeah. This dude's like, because when you considering what he does to the room, because I kind of forget, when they're on the rooftops and they're messing with Ari and all that stuff, I kind of forget that Elodin literally does some Tablet the Great shit in this chapter. Like like you just said, with that kind of control of the wind, and if you can control all these matter in that way, and then we see what Kvothe does to that, the battalion or whatever that's around Cinder, and then just imagining what Elodin would be able to do in a similar circumstance. I mean, you wipe out armies, man.
But if going up against Chandrian specifically, he's going up against Haliax, who was able to name Cinder and just completely shut that dude down like it was nothing. Like, obviously, Elodin talks about like being able to name a person is much harder than naming the wind or naming stone or any of that kind of stuff. He's like, it's on a totally different level. And Haliax had complete mastery over Cinder with ease, to the point where it seems like he has mastery over all of their names because everybody else just sat there like, oh, shit. Fucking, they all are clearly intimidated by him. So if he's got that kind of mastery, and he's been around thousands of years, as between the creation war now has been 5,000 years. Who knows how long they were alive before that, but he's clearly been a master namer for thousands of years. So he's probably on a totally different playing field than Kvothe or Elodin at this point.
Well, and then considering the rest of the group, I like thinking about this Grey Dalsenti now, especially like when you consider what we talked about with Felurian, the idea that he can basically, from what you were using as a speculation, it seems like he can just send people into the rookery, right? I mean, that's the idea, right?
Yeah, it seems like he could possibly have a similar power to Felurian, where she's able to drive men mad with her sexual prowess and her just aura. It seems like he might have a similar ability in some respect by speaking or telepathically or something.
I wonder if there'll be more, if we'll get someone living now, examples of shaper, people that are able to actually, like, to be able to see someone. I mean, what is a shaper? They're literally able to make things, like literally,
We're definitely going to learn what shapers are. That's definitely going to be in the third book. Like, someone was talking to Rothfuss, asked a question, and it was with regard to shaping. He was like, you're going to love the third book.
Yeah.
So,
oh, cool.
Yeah, shaping is going to be definitely a part of it.
Yeah, I wonder if he's got, if one of the Chandrian got that power. Or if they all
I think Kvothe gets that power. I think that's my guess on the difference between putting the ring on the left hand or the right hand, I think one of the hands is more shaping than just naming. One's for naming, one's for shaping. And so
talk about more than mastery. That's yeah.
It's on a different level and a different type of power. But yeah, I think we're going to learn what shaping is, and I think Kvothe is going to learn how to become a shaper, and I think that's probably necessary for him to be able to open either the 4-plate door or the lackless door, or both if they're separate. I think shaping is going to play a huge role in the third book.
Looking forward to it. Is he working on this? Is he writing the third book? Or is this?
I don't think so.
I
think he's taken off the. He's been on sabbatical for the last 9 years. And he's going to get to it at some point.
He's just doing a lot of, oh, dude, you're going to love the third book. I'm going to throw that in there, too. Yeah. All of this. Anything that you can think of that's going to be really good, that's all in there. And the stuff you can't think of, that stuff's in there, too.
He's probably waiting for a podcast like ours to come out so he can listen to it and hear about what our ideas are, like what we would like to see in the third book and what we think's going to happen. He's going to steal all those ideas. And then he's going to make the book. Like, I have no idea how to end this. So let's just wait until someone comes out with some really good ideas. Then I'm going to steal them.
Suddenly we start seeing all these Mario Brothers examples just start popping in. It's all going to be
Mario Brothers, Tonto, and fucking the Lone Ranger. Obviously that's where it has to go. But it's going to be a little bit disappointing when we see we're right. Because then we're always going to wonder, did he steal it from us? Yeah. Because it has to go in that direction. There's just no other way. The story doesn't make sense without it.
Oh, my God.
I also like, though, when Elodin is like, watch this. And he picks up one of the chairs and just flings it against the wall. And it shatters and doesn't do anything to the glass. And he's like, I used to do that for hours. Elodin said, drawing a deep breath and looking around the room fondly. Good times.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. It really sets the tone where it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't seem to. He just doesn't take many things seriously. And considering he's locked in this room for maybe 2 years, and battling it out in his mind, and he can just look back and laugh at it. It's pretty great. Speaks to his character. How enjoyable the character is.
Yeah, and then Kvothe asks his second question, which was, how did you get out? And so he tells him, goes through his little spiel about, you see, once upon a time, Elodin the Great found himself locked in a high tower. He had gestured around to the room around us. He had been stripped of his tools, his coin, key, and candle. Furthermore, his cell had no doors worth mentioning, no window that could be breached. He made dismissive gestures at each of these. Even the name of the wind was hidden from him by the clever machinations of his captors. That's where I was talking about, where that's, I think, what that part is talking about. And he got up from the couch, and then all around him was nothing but smooth, hard stone. It was a cell no man had ever escaped. But Elodin the Great knew the name of all things, and so all things were his to command. He faced the gray wall beside the windows. He said to the stone, break, and Elodin trailed off, his head tilting to one side curiously, his eyes narrowed. Sod me, they changed it. Huh. He stepped closer to the wall, lay a hand on it. He said, oh, that was half clever of them. And he took 2 steps from the wall, Sire Basalian. I saw the wall move. It rippled like a hanging rug thumped with a stick.
So great.
Then it simply fell, like dark water poured from a bucket. Tons of fine gray sand spilled across the floor in a sudden rush, bearing Elodin's feet to his shins. So the description of that, it reminds me like of the scene where the helicopter crashes into the building in the Matrix, and you see the glass just kind of ripple out from the building, and then all after it ripples out, it just explodes. But it explodes in sand in this. Like, that's kind of how I picture it. But it's great too, because right before that, when he's like, and I said break, and then Kvothe, nothing happened. So Kvothe is immediately thinking like, this guy's fucking crazy. What if I went and took this fucking sock out and just locked him in here? And then right after that, fucking Elodin figures it out and is like, Sire Basalian, and does that shit
Well,
and just fucking blows his doors off.
Well, I love that he also goes as far as, to me, it's really important that he also says, "Would the other masters thank me?" So, because it does suggest like, is this like this dude's nuts, but he's powerful? Is basically the entire is the entire university basically kind of his captor in a way? Like because they can't keep him, so it's like so. Maybe I just walk out and everybody's like, all right, thanks. You're a hero.
Yeah, I've been trying to catch this dude forever. Finally did it for us.
No, but I love the way he wrote the wall move, rippled like a hanging rug thumped with a stick. I saw the same thing that you're talking about because of the way he wrote that, where you can just like envision that ripple. It's great. It's very effective.
Yeah, and you get more on the copper through the walls. He has to obviously break the copper. He doesn't name the copper. Yeah, he physically breaks it out with whatever like debris from the chair he broke. And he talks about how he'd been locked in there for 2 years, and then Kvothe gets to his last question: "What do I have to do to study naming under you?" He met my eye calmly, appraising me. "Jump," he said. "Jump off this roof." That's when I realized all of this had been a test. Elodin had been taking my measure ever since we met. He had a grudging respect for my tenacity, and he had been surprised that I had noticed something odd about the air in his room. He was on the verge of accepting me as a student, but he needed more. Proof of my dedication, a demonstration, a leap of faith. As I stood there, a piece of story came to mind. So Tamerlane fell, but he did not despair, for he knew the name of the wind. And so the wind obeyed him. It cradled and caressed him. It bore him to the ground as gently as a pull of thistledown. It set him on his feet softly as a mother's kiss. Elodin knew the name of the wind. Still looking him in the eye, I stepped off the edge of the roof. Elodin's expression was marvelous. I had never seen a man so astonished. I spun slightly as I fell, so he stayed in my line of vision. I saw him raise one hand slightly as if making a belated attempt to grab hold of me. I felt weightless, like I was floating. Then I struck the ground, not gently, like a feather settling down, hard, like a brick hitting the cobblestone street. I landed on my back with my left arm beneath me. My vision went dark as the back of my head struck the ground and all the air was driven from my body. It's one of my favorite scenes in the book because I still remember like my first time for that part, because when he says jump and Kvothe is like, he was testing me. My initial reaction was like, yeah, he was.
Yeah.
And then Kvothe jumps and he just falls. Like, there's no catching him. Fucking Elodin just looks at him like, you idiot. Why would you do that?
The when I read it now, that the whole paragraph of, oh, he was just testing me, it's just arrogance. The whole thing is just like self-righteous or like, self-importance. It's his own arrogance. And then the fact that he holds his eye, like he turns towards, like, you're such a jackass. Yeah. It makes him look even more ridiculous.
Go ahead. Call that name of the wind. Save me. It's like, dude, I can't do that.
Man.
Like, I ain't got that kind of power.
That's great.
It's like, I was joking. I'm not actually Elodin the Great. I'm just Elodin, you jackass.
Oh yeah, that was so good.
And then I love when he gets down at the end when he's like, he looked down at me. Congratulations. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Ever.
Yeah, it's I think of the first read through, I was just I was just very taken aback, like, what? Like, what just happened? I was kind of lost a little bit, where I'm like, hold on, I don't get it. It took me like a minute to like, oh, okay. So the whole time he was telling him the truth. Like, this is not, none of this is a test. This is what's at stake in this shit. And, although he shouldn't have told him to jump off the roof.
No. But you don't think you would think like the guy wouldn't just jump, like he would say something first, like ask like, I'll kill myself. Like, why would I jump? Like, are you going to catch me? Like, how, like you would ask some questions. Like, I would have many questions before I'd be willing to jump. Like, all right, so this is kind of like a leap of faith. I'm going to jump, and then you're going to fucking call the name of the wind and cradle me to the ground. Is that what's going on? Like, I'm not just jumping.
It's gotta. So putting yourself in Elodin's shoes for the rest, of the book, Kvothe ends up in his
should be like, God damn, I better be careful what I tell this kid to do.
So like I was gonna say when he's teaching him in the class, like they have that background where it's like I saw this dude just literally do this because I said do it.
Yeah, definitely do not tell him to cut off his hand or something. Yeah, cut your hand off. This guy will do it. Fucking jackass.
Well, he does tell him stop grabbing my tits, and that was very effective.
Yeah,
he didn't grab his tits anymore.
But you get another one of those where Rothfuss is great at the deadpan humor.
Yeah.
Like after that, he looked down at me. Congratulations, he said. That was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen. His expression was a mix of awe and disbelief ever. And then there's a pause, and then and that is when I decided to pursue the noble art of artifice.
Yeah, I made that same note of the great dry humor is very similar. It reminds me very similar to when he walked into the bar with Scarpy, where he just immediately he goes to the next thing where it's like, this helped me make my decision. Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah,
and then
the last part was, nevertheless, I wasn't terribly put out by Elodin's refusal, storybook magic or no. I was not eager to study under a man whose first set of lessons had left me with 3 broken ribs, a mild concussion, and a dislocated shoulder.
Pretty great. I mean, that's the introduction to Elodin, and then have maybe I can get this guy to teach me. He ends up getting thrown off a building, and then what everybody thinks happened, that he pissed him off so much that he threw him off the top of a building, which is just again adding to his. Talk about. What a way to add to your reputation. Jump off of a fucking building with one of the masters next to you who has, the background that he has. That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Rothfuss is... The reason these books are so awesome, there's not these massive, like, holy shit moments where, like, something just shocking and unexpected takes place. There's never moments where like my jaw drops to the floor that he surprised the shit out of me and he took it in a totally different direction. But every fucking chapter is just phenomenal. Yeah. Like when I go back to them, I'm like, oh, this chapter's great. Oh, this one's great. Oh, this one's great. It's over and over again. They're all fucking great. And it's not because like he set me up and shocked me. It's just, man, he's such a great writer. Yeah. He writes conversations, personalities, every aspect of it. He's just so good at it.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive to go through it multiple times and still be like picking up new things, and then also just not necessarily always new, but oh yeah, he kind of did it in this nuanced way. It's very it's very thoughtfully done. The things that he's got, and he's building everything up. And I like pointing those things out, and I like the additional read throughs as well to see those little pepperings of. I don't even remember what I mentioned in that last chapter or 2 chapters ago, but like those little, just small little bridges to where we're going to get to. It's great.
All right, the next chapter is chapter 47. It's titled Barbs, and we learn about some of the different things he learns in his first semester at the university and his budding antagonism with Ambrose and his nurturing of his reputation. So I love, even though this is a short chapter, I like this a lot. Because of some of the things it talks about. Like, you learn like what he studied. I studied Medica and learning about the different parts of the body and how to heal things. He learned Ciaru. He got further in the ranks in artificery. And he was doing a lot of his work at the Kilvin's workshop.
Yeah, it's a nice little summary. And then it touches on what I mentioned a moment ago about Kilvin's mind. Every span, Kelvin gave me a copper jot, sometimes two. I suspected there was a great tally board in that methodical mind of his, carefully marking down the hours of each person worked. So it kind of, and he continuously does that in further chapters, but I just thought I'd touch on it since we just talked about that. But yeah, I mean, it's a really short chapter, but there is quite a bit contained. You know, he becomes tighter friends with Willem and Sim. He had others, but none so close as them. You know, and then the line that we've talked about so many times about Ambrose, where, you know, he kind of touches on essentially what he knows how he should act, yet he just refuses to. I believe that's contained in this chapter, right?
Well, I like the way he describes it. He goes, and there was Ambrose. To deem us simply enemies is to lose the true flavor of our relationship. It was more like the two of us entered into a business partnership in order to more efficiently pursue our mutual interest of hating each other. It's like it's such a great way to describe their relationship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So anyone with a lick of common sense knew how to deal with arrogant nobility. The tailor I had terrorized back in Tarbine knew what to do. You take your lumps, duck your head, and get the whole thing over as quickly as possible. But I always fought back, and while Ambrose was intelligent and reasonably well-spoken, he was no match for my trooper's tongue. I had been raised on the stage, and my sharp-roo wits ensured that I got the better of our exchanges. But yeah, and then they continues to point out that the whole thing barbs. He would snap at me and leave with a face full of barbs. And each time we parted ways, we hated each other just a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like people notice, and by the end of the term, I had a reputation for reckless bravery, but the truth is I was merely fearless. There's a difference, you see. In Tarbine, I learned real fear. I feared hunger, pneumonia, guards with hobnail boots, older boys with bottle glass knives. Confronting Ambrose required no real bravery on my part. I simply couldn't muster any real fear of him. I saw him as a puffed-up clown. I thought he was harmless. I was a fool.
Yeah, it is. That's a pretty great way to put it, because he's not playing a role as like the brave hero. He's like, fuck this guy. Yeah, I get why everybody's scared of him, but fuck this guy. Like, I had real things to be scared of in the past where I could lose my fucking life. Again, he's a fool because he's not paying attention to the fact that he's layering in what could get him killed. But again, though, I mean, you can't help but really appreciate that to a huge degree. It's interesting though, because the way Fitz has described it, where he reads it and he's like, "Come on, man, just let it go." Like, almost feel like he's like his dad or something. But for me, when I read it, dude, man, do it, get in there.
Yeah,
I can't help it, man.
And Fitz is right.
Yeah,
like,
he's right. Yeah.
The smart thing would be to not do those things, but it would be less entertaining to read, and there's obviously going to be hell to pay doing. That's why he's saying I was a fool.
Yeah,
is there's going to be hell to pay for snapping at Ambrose, but man, it just would not be. It would not be as entertaining if he wasn't fucking smacking this fucking little prick around.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man, and it's what it's a huge part of what again endears you to Kvothe. And again, it's the flawed hero. It's he knows better. He just can't help himself, or refuses to help himself, I guess.
Yeah, the only other part of that chapter was him and Basil concocting his reputation. He would tell Basil what to say, and Basil would go and spread the rumors. And he's like, reputation is a sword of armor, or a weapon you can brandish if need be. I decided that if I was going to be an arcanist, I might as well be a well-known arcanist, so I let slip a few pieces of information. I had been admitted without a letter of recommendations. The master had given me 3 talents to attend, rather than make me pay a tuition. I had survived for years on the streets of Tarbine, living off my wits. I even started a few rumors that were pure nonsense, lies so outrageous that people would repeat them despite the fact that they were obviously untrue. I had demon blood in me. I could see in the dark. I only slept an hour each night. When the moon was full, I would talk in my sleep, speaking a strange language no one could understand.
Yeah, I dig it. These little, again, he's a Maru. He understands stories, and then it's also, pepper some things that just simply aren't believable, just to make it interesting.
And, the things that they've seen him do is why these stories can hold up at all.
Yeah.
Is because they've seen him get whipped and not bleed, and things that shouldn't be possible. I mean, his skin split apart, but he didn't bleed. And so, like, they've seen these things that just don't make any sense. That he's able to light the master's foot on fire when he shouldn't be able to pull that kind of heat. And so they see these things that shouldn't be able to happen. And then that puts enough doubt in their mind when they hear, like, he's got demon blood. Like, well, maybe he does have demon blood.
Maybe that, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the unbelievable leads to what could be, make other unbelievable things credible. Or somewhat.
And it leads to, fucking old Cobb telling stories about Kvothe that make no fucking sense whatsoever. Is like, you see the effects of telling these nonsense stories mixed in with truth. It leads to these, fanciful fucking acts of whatever it is,
heroism.
These heroic tales and all that kind of shit. But the truth of the matter is less so than these fanciful stories that they come up with.
And it always goes back to what he and his father talked about, which was, you got to bend the truth to make it believable. You got to pepper in some lies here and there to make it seem more true, or to make it seem true in itself.
Yeah, and then moving into chapter 48, which is titled Interlude, and it's a silence of a different kind. It's basically, you get Bass being scared of the silence. You get that feeling of Bass being terrified of Kvothe's silence, and explains kind of why. And then Kvothe, the reason he was silent was he was trying to think of how he was going to describe Denna. And so he starts to kind of go into that and explains that he's just going to have to kind of dance around it.
I like, I like this chapter in a similar way to the prologue. It's really, really interesting to me the way that he describes fear that is attained through, like, specifically it's almost like a metaphor, but Bast falling out of a tree. And he wasn't scared of heights, right, until he slips and he hangs for a minute before he fell. Now he has a fear of a similar circumstance. So it's like an attainable fear where he didn't used to fear the quiet. Now he fears the quiet because of what it means for his, master, for Reshi, for Kvothe. So I like the way he did that. I think it's really interesting to sort of compartmentalize or sort of assign a depth to where we are here and to what. Bass is interesting. He's like, as a literary tool for the book, he gets utilized a lot by Rothfuss as almost like a directional tool for the reader.
Yeah, a lot of what he's there for is to just let you know, like, that Kvothe is dying, that he's not, he's losing everything that he once was, and it's not just simply that he's hiding, that he's changing, he's becoming less of who he was, and to a point of that he's dying, literally dying.
Yeah, it's again, I really like the way he does it, and I'm not gonna read the whole chapter, but I gave that one example, but he gives examples of, like, storms that blacken the sky, or different things that are uncomfortable or that can unnerve you. And, like, he didn't care for heights, but then it goes to the extent of actually falling out of a tree. You don't forget that sensation. So it's kind of, it's, again, that's what the silence now sort of holds and incorporates with, his friend is dying.
And then you get how important Denna is to the story, as that's the reason for the silence, is he just does not know how to talk about this girl. Like, I mean, we see it, like, in his interactions with her through the books. Like, he doesn't understand her. He does not see even the things we can see as the reader. He's not able to see them. And, like I will admit, he said that I am not sure how to approach the next part of the story. And it's clear that, he just does not get Denna at all.
I like how he kind of, he talked about kind of Denna and music. Because we've been missing music for a little bit here. So he kind of gives a reminder there that's kind of, these are the things that make up Kvothe, like who he is, the things that like deep inside that he always goes back to. But it seems like Denna has a special place there because he could still play music. Now, he doesn't still play music, but he could. It doesn't seem like he can get to Denna. It seems like she's either dead or it seems like she's out of the picture, right? I mean,
yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
Is where he's at. But yeah, what happened to her is the huge mystery. But clearly something major happened because he breaks that glass bottle when Chronicler mentions her, and he doesn't have access to his sympathy. So it's clearly something major happens with her.
Well, in terms of emphasis, it's as simple as not women, Bast, a woman, the woman. So yeah.
Yeah, I like that part too. When he's like, what vital element is lacking? Women, Rushy. There's a real paucity of women.
I like
fast.
It's also it's an extraordinarily effective way to give much more depth to Denna, because it's not like he can just talk about it. He's done this a couple times where it's like, and this woman, how do I even talk about her? How do I even, if I say she was beautiful, that doesn't even come close. And it kind of he builds to it. He's tried to build to it a number of times without actually being able to do it. And this is what he's doing here again. Is I'm about to go into this. Let's see how close I can even come.
Yeah, I like the way he describes it when he's talking about, like, you can't, trying to make you understand her with nothing more than words. You've never seen her, never heard her voice. You cannot know. But still, I will try. She's in the wings now, waiting for her cue. Let us set the stage for her arrival. It's a great storyteller.
Yeah.
And then the last part, I think, is by far the biggest part of the story. Is one of the biggest parts of both books. Is something a lot of people probably miss. Is they go, but before we continue, the real world has certain calls on me that I can no longer ignore. If you will please excuse me for a moment. I think that they took a bathroom break.
We don't get those, right? But it does seem to insinuate that he's going to take a piss or possibly taking a shit.
Yeah. I think that is strong evidence that people in this world take pees and poops.
Well, it does say the next sentence, Chronicler and Bast stood as well, stretching their legs and attending to calls of their own.
Yeah.
However,
so I think people have to use the restroom in this world.
However, as we think we're getting that little nugget here to make it so real, Bast lit the lamps and Kvothe produced more cheese and bread. So I think they don't have colons. They also don't have bladders. Because I thought we were getting a bathroom break, but now it seems like nope, no peas, no poops, no brushing teeth.
It's not
no flossing.
It's not explicitly told. I'm sure it's going to be a big part of book 3.
He's going to make up for all the lost bathroom breaks.
It's going to be a huge part of book 3 is solving this mystery of the bathroom breaks.
Strange.
But that's our biggest clue that they do use the restroom. They have to use the restroom in this story.
That is a very strange. It's a strange critique. They don't take poops and peas.
Yeah.
And be like, you know what? Go to page 350, bottom of 350. Yeah. I insinuate something there. There you go. You get your pee and poop you needed. Yeah. So bad.
And then there's the other scene where he talks about like he felt the urge to take a piss on the Adim's special tree. So he threw it in there.
Yeah, that's true.
And I wonder like if it in his mind was like, I should probably mention that they have to use the restroom at some point in the story.
Just-
Like, did you feel like you needed to add that in
Just
there?
one interlude chapter. Just like on the new,
Otherwise, it's just not real.
in the new editions, there's going to be an interlude chapter, chapter 34, interlude, poops and peas. And it's literally like, Kvothe took a shit, Bass took a piss. There you go. Good enough? Chronicler brushed his teeth.
Reading the town's newspaper.
You guys happy now?
Yeah. Then we go into chapter 49, the nature of things. The nature of wild things. I assume that's talking about using the restroom as well.
Yeah, sure.
And this is him kind of giving the prelude to what's going to lead him to Denna. And it also talks about him going through his second admissions, getting his tuition, which is more money than he had, which leads him to have to find a money lender that will give him some money, a galet, which leads him to Devi.
Yeah, we also get a little bit about the admissions process and lottery. I don't think we had heard about the lottery before this.
No, we had not.
Yeah, so I mean, it ends up being something that is part of his world after every term. But and then also Kilvin, he speaks up, or we don't get to hear it explicitly, but it's in the background where Kilvin and him are going back and forth. So Kilvin, it seems like Kilvin really has Kvothe's back. Although when I say that, we also know him's a fucking idiot. So chances are they're back and forth debating on what Kvothe's tuition is going to be. Him's probably just being a complete jackass, we have to assume, because that's who he is. And
especially we see when him as the chancellor, Kvothe's tuition skyrocket.
What is it?
When him's
you said that before, but do you know what it is?
He gets like
give it relative.
At one point like something like 40 talents.
Jesus.
Charged like 40, like 20, one like 20 talents, another like 40. Like and he was taking half of anything over 10. So he fucking made out like a fucking bandit on fucking him's stupidity.
That's great. It always bites him right back.
Yeah.
It's fantastic how that works out.
Yeah, there's no point where him gets one over on Kvothe through 2 books.
So it's interesting that Kvothe hates poetry. Makes it clear. Seems like Rothfuss probably hates poetry. Or at least whatever. He chose this.
He does not. He is specifically... People have asked Rothfuss, like, so what's your deal with poetry? Like, why do you have a problem with poetry? He's like, I don't. I love poetry.
Just a character.
Like,
yeah.
Oh, I see what's happening. You think I'm Kvothe. I am not.
Yeah, that's funny. I just did that. But
yeah,
because when he's describing Denna here, again, it's not really poetry, but he's describing her as like sly and skittish yet alert. He describes her like a wild animal, and like how you have to be careful in approaching a wild animal. Now he's saying this and even talking about her. I mean, talk about putting somebody on a pedestal. This is kind of ridiculous. Like when you think about it, like no wonder he never hooked up with her. This is fucking. Yeah. You can't even talk about her. What's your deal, dude?
No, this is definitely like fucking freshman high school boy talking about a women.
But he never shook it.
Man, dude, this is why you don't get it. Well, he eventually figures women out to an extent and starts hooking up, but he never loses that with his first high school crush. Yeah. He's always stuck in that same state of mind. Yeah, he puts her on a massive pedestal.
Yeah, it's cool, but again, it definitely, the way he describes it, I mean, more than does its job. And in doing that, and separating her from everything else in his life experience, nothing fits into his mind or his emotions or his psychology or any of it in the way that Denna does. There's a separate place for her and everything else.
No, it seems like he feels like he can do anything he puts his mind to other than get Denna to want to be with him.
Although she wants to be with him, and he just can't see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which
clear as fucking day.
What's so...
She and it's not even like she's coy about it. She doesn't really hide it.
She
She's
says
like,
it explicitly
"Yo,
multiple times.
Come with me to Annalyn. Fucking, hey, you can make a move, you can try a little bit.
Yeah.
You can put your arm around me."
She
Like,
explicitly says, like, steal me away. Take me.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many different ways. And he's just like, oh, but I don't want to be that guy. You mean the guy she's telling you to be? You don't want to be that guy?
Yeah.
Talk about it. I mean, that's like a new galaxy of pedestal. I mean, it's not even like a new level. Yeah. He's put it into the stratosphere. Jesus. Which is unhealthy.
Yeah,
it's unhealthy.
No.
It's not healthy for Denna. I mean, it doesn't help anyone.
It's one of the most frustrating aspects of the books by far. It's the only part of the books where I get like frustrated reading it. Like, dude, get real, man. Wake the fuck up. Like, what are you doing?
Again, well, so it's an interesting. It's not a flaw. I mean, it is a flaw, but it's it's rounding out a character. I mean, he has all these tremendous capabilities and possibilities and all these gifts, and then he has everything that he would need to make Denna want him, and she does. Yet he still can't. And same thing with Fella. Fella wants him. I mean, so many different women throughout his life, and he even gets Florian. He gets the woman that no one else can get, and he gets her. Yet he pulls back. Yeah, it's fucking so weird. I mean, I guess it is weird. It's strange, and it's it's cool in that way. It's great, and in that way as well, where that he can't conquer.
Yeah, it's very frustrating too.
Yeah.
And then last part of it was, once he gets his high tuition and Kilvin was ready to, sounds like, murder him, but you get him maintain more composure than I would have if I had been faced with 20 stone of furious bellowing artificer. But then he's like, I needed a Gaelet, one of the dangerous men who lend money to desperate people. You might have heard of them referred to romantically as Copperhawks, but more often they're referred to as Shimgals or Lits. Regardless of the name, they exist everywhere. The hard part is finding them. They tend to be rather secretive, as their business is semi-legal at best. So we're going to get our introduction to Devi, which chapter 50, it's titled Negotiations.
Well, I guess he
goes to
real quick. Maybe it's worth mentioning. Maybe we already know it, but he does make a point of describing how he is different than other students. In case that we hadn't picked up on it already, other students either have families to borrow from, or they can borrow on their names. It's not something that occurred to me, because I guess it's like credit in our world, right? But in their world, it's like you have a name, so that's like your credit. So, that's what drives him too. And then he does set the table for moneylenders being like a semi-legal, somewhat shady, circle of individuals that serve a purpose, just like they do in our world, right? So this would be like going to, I don't know what you even call it, I guess a moneylender, a bookie, or whatever, rather than going to a bank.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then and also he it talks about like he doesn't want to tell his friends about his desperate poverty. Obviously, they're not blind. The dude's got fucking he's wearing the same clothes he's got 2 shirts. So, I mean, if you're wearing the same shirt every single day, people are going to probably pick up on that clue that you ain't got a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, his dad, I was going to mention he had a line from his father, which is like something that I've heard in my own life. There are 2 sure ways to lose a friend. One is to borrow, the other to lend. So, I mean, again, he gives himself he's kind of desperate, right? He doesn't have anybody else. So he's going to do whatever he can to not burn a bridge. So, yeah. So he's going to desperate measures, I guess.
Yeah, and then so we get into chapter 50, which is negotiations. And in this chapter, he goes to Imre and he finds Devi, tries to make a deal with her to borrow money, but he doesn't like the conditions of having to give blood. So he initially leaves, but then he sees a loot in a pawn shop. And once he just goes in there and he decides he's going to get the pawn shop, he decides that he will end up borrowing money from Devi. So he ends up borrowing money from her, gets his loot, and heads back into the back to the university after that.
I like this. This drives at what I was mentioning before about what I like about Kvothe so much. The end of that drives at what specifically I like about him, because he's very careful and measured. He tries to weigh out why he cannot do what Devi wants him to do, to borrow the money. She wants more money than he wants to borrow, and the conditions and everything else we'll get into. And then he realizes, fuck it, take the risk. Not only can I, have my tuition covered, but also have a loot. And, he just completely goes in another direction and decides, I know what I like about what Rothfuss does there so much is he lays out for us everything that's at risk. Kvothe weighs out those things, knows what he should do, but then says, screw it, I'll just take the risk. And goes in the direction of what I would imagine would be, obviously he's much more comfortable. Now he gets to, he can have a loot, plus he can, he's not sleeping outdoors. Everything's covered on his tuition, but he's rolling the dice for his future. He does see, if I remember right, he does see prospects of being able to make money in the artificery. He's made a little bit already, so he's like, well, there is something that could come there. But yeah, it's definitely it's a roll of the dice, because he has no assuredness that he's going to be able to pay Devi back, comfortably.
Yeah, he's digging himself a hole, and you never know if you're going to be able to fucking get your way out of it once you start digging. But I also like too that you had, Imre was a haven for the arts. There were musicians, dramatists, sculptors, dancers, and the practitioners of 100 other smaller arts, even the lowest art of all, poetry. But you get the interplay that between the people in the university look down on the artists, and then the artists think the university kids are meddling with things better left undone, and so they both have this. They have the grudging respect, but you wouldn't want your daughter to marry one.
Yeah. I like the world building in this chapter is pretty evident. How there's plumbing, sympathy lamps. There's good glass, so they have windows and mirrors, which to me really makes a big difference for me, because you don't picture those types of items, and then they're mentioned, and then you're kind of like, oh, okay, so that's not necessarily everywhere. You know what I mean? So those amenities aren't necessarily everywhere. So these two cultures are benefiting from one another, but then still, just like in our world, they look down on one another because they're different, right? I kind of like how they mentioned, they view the Imre citizens as self-indulgent and decadent because of the arts. But then that's where they're hanging out. Why are they hanging out there? Because it's fun to hang out with artists. There's music and whatever. It definitely plays on our world.
It's a dynamic we see in our world. You could think of it with the people who go and get PhDs, and they're teachers, but they have this very highfalutin view of themselves, and they look down on people that are that are build homes or plumbers, even though a lot of those people make way more money.
Yeah.
But they have this idea that they are better than them, whereas the working class guy is also looking at these people that have spent their time studying different eras of the world, different historians and that kind of thing, and they look at them like they're jackasses. So neither side really respects the other side, and they both look down on the other person.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, and that's a funny fact to our world, right? The absurdity of how we all nobody had. Well, it's a lack of empathy on anybody's end, I guess. All right, or consideration of what other people's interests might be. It's all practical. I mean, carpentry, I guess, is more practical than certain other types of professors, but.
Well, it's just like, specialized knowledge has its place, but some people think that if I have a specialized knowledge in X and this guy's specializes in Y, I'm better than him. Mine's better for some reason. Or it's like,
because it's yours.
Like, the only difference is one might be more lucrative as it's a more sought after specialized knowledge. Like, but it's still, you're just learning learning knowledge that other people don't possess.
Yeah, it's pretty cool too when we're placed in the world as well, where we get that little taste of there's somewhere in Imre and there's live music, and Kvothe loves music, but he can't even stand it. He can't even be in the room. It's like, it's so upsetting because that's how big a deal it is to him, which is great. It lays, but then suddenly, in this read through, it was interesting. Suddenly, he's talking about sweet eaters, the resin addicts, and we get more details about Denna resin. And I remember, at least this read through, I was kind of like, well, that's almost out of the blue. And then it ends up being an extended metaphor for when he's holding that loot that's not even that great. Yeah. He's like a resin addict. And he literally says he would do the same thing that desperate, crackhead was dancing in the street naked for just a taste of it.
Yeah, because she is like, promising him anything. And then he uses the same exact words when he's holding the thing. I would have did anything.
I love it though, man, because in his mind that's what's happening, but on the surface he's hustling the shit out of this dude, man.
Yeah,
like he's putting on a great show. He's untuning the loot. He's talking about how it's cracked. It's for my brother, and I don't hate him enough to give him a shitty loot, but I'll give you this, and talks him way the fuck down. But it's great. Yeah. His ingenuity is so great in that scene because he reads the guy from the get go, and then
that's where you really get the sense that of his bullshit sales technique that he tried to put on us about his stupid cloak. It's clearly super nerdy and stupid, but he's using that same technique of trying to just sell us into believing the opposite of the truth.
Yeah, I
didn't fall for it, man. I did not fall for it on that one.
He is a hell of a salesperson. But and it's interesting too because the way the whole thing plays out is pretty great because he's reading the guy from the get go, and testing him in those little ways. It's such a great part of it. But we did skip over something.
So now we're introduced to Devi, which is one of my favorite characters in the book. I love it. Like, if I was going to get with any of the girls that are in these books, Devi would be my top choice. That would be the girl I'd get down with.
I like the waitress with big boobs. But yes, no, I also like Debbie a lot. I think the intro is great because I it's hard for me on to put myself in the place of a first read through, but there's no reason to think he's a man or a woman until Kvothe assumes that she's a man.
Yeah,
right. Because he's assuming, he's assessing the risk. A Gaelet would simply have you beaten or robbed or both, borrowing money. This was not smart. I was playing with fire, but I don't have any better options. And then he somehow mentions, I don't know, he just mentions...
He said, I had learned in Tarbean that the best way to deal with this type of man
Yeah.
was to act with confidence and self-assurance.
Yeah,
They were in
there
the
you go.
business of taking advantage of other people's weakness. Yeah, and then he meets it, and it's this little fucking tiny girl
Yeah.
who, in her own right, is way more powerful, way more dangerous than, a big burly man.
Yeah, she's pretty great. I mean, from the get-go, you're kind of like, you don't really know what to expect. He describes her with a pixie-like face. She smiles pretty, often. She's kind of almost like even coming on to him, almost in a way, very in a coy way, but subtly. And then, but she's very self-assured. From the get-go, she's very likable.
She comes off like a girl that like grew up as a tomboy, but then grew into herself and became, a woman, but still had she's got a lot of the personality traits that, tomboy girls have, where they have a lot of similarities with men. Seems like she probably, the type of girl that is more comfortable hanging around men than other girls.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I feel like I get the same impression. I like. Well, we get a little taste of. He says Kvothe, and she's like, "Oh, I've heard a thing or two about you." So we get a little taste that his reputation is traveling, But then I love that she says, "I thought you'd be taller." I thought that was pretty. That was pretty funny, given Kvothe's assumptions about her. I think he's going to be a big burly dude, and it's some little girl.
Yeah. Yeah, and she immediately, I thought you'd be a bigger dude. You're kind of a little short guy.
That's always a funny thing.
And you get, like, she's heard the reputations on him. He's like, "What have you heard?" I asked, filled the silence. "Nothing bad, I hope." "Good and bad," she grinned, "but nothing boring."
Yeah, I dig that.
He loves when people know of his reputation. Like, this dude's got such a massive ego. Like, anytime he hears people telling stories about him, he's just gonna fucking just chill there and listen.
Yeah, he always wants to hear it. Yeah. Who's the well, I guess they do that later. They do that later where they have a back and forth about his rep. And he does that with
the other Gaelic, the other guy. Yeah.
They talk about the reps.
They go back and forth, yeah. And when his stories start to spread, like, he just goes and chills in bars and listens. So, like, he loves hearing about the rumors that he spreads about himself. And then she offers him the loan, which I like that she's like 4 talents. That's the minimum, and the interest 50% every 2 months. So she has no minimum, which we find out later.
Yeah.
She purely is trying to come up with an amount that she thinks he won't be able to pay back. Because what she's really interested in is pinning people up against the wall so that she can leverage that against them to gain information or access to different things that she normally would not be able to gain access to.
Yeah, it's definitely that's definitely more interesting. I dig her approach in that way. Obviously, it's not just about money. She has much more, I don't know, interesting interests than just the money itself. She's definitely an interesting character.
It's kind of like Varys in Song of Ice and Fire, where it goes from robbing people to learning that secrets are much more valuable than their jewels. And so
blackmail,
so like, knowledge is much more powerful, and that's obviously what she's trading in. Is mainly she's interested in knowledge and information and books and access, much more so than money. It's like, once it dawns on him when he really starts looking around, and he's like, shit, look at her bookshelf. Like, all the books she owns is more money than I've ever had in my life.
I like her whole.
And she owns those in books.
I like her whole approach. How she's just like how he tries to negotiate. She's like, "Yeah, we're not negotiating." I should have made that clear in the beginning. And she's not a dick about it either. But she's like, she takes charge, which is definitely respectable.
Yeah, and he throws that back in her face too. Because he goes, how about 2 talents, I said. Then at the end, Devi waved her hands, cutting me off. We aren't bargaining here. I'm just informing you as the conditions of the loan. She smiled apologetically. I'm sorry I didn't make that clear from the beginning. He throws that back in her face when he goes to make a deal to get the horse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
To go to Traben.
Yeah.
Like, he throws that back in her face. He's like, no. When she starts negotiating with him, he's like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. We're not negotiating here.
Yeah.
He throws her words back in her face. But yeah, then he bitches out because he don't want to give her fucking blood. He gets all fucking scared like a little girl.
Yeah, it's interesting how that plays out because, well, first, we don't really... We know how bad that can be. But we're correct me if I'm wrong, but I read this as this is the first introduction of being able to douse, or however they put it, where you can track somebody, right? Like I never, at least I hadn't considered that until it's pointed out. But
I don't even like. Do they even talk about? Well, I guess the only mention they have of it is when Willem is telling him about the Medica doesn't charge, but when you come into the hospital, but you got to pay before you leave. And he's like, yeah, what good would it do to run if an arcanist has your blood?
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't talk about dousing specifically, but they can do some damage from a distance with your blood. And and we get, like, when he's teaching hymns class, he talks about, like, just think of the danger a well-trained arcanist could do with your blood or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I had considered that and thought about that when he's like, no, hell no. Why would I do what? I can't do blood. This is ridiculous. But when they explicitly mention, you can never hide from me, I can douse you out anywhere. It's interesting also, her reaction is like, dude, what? Calm down, man. Like, this is normal. Like, what's your fucking deal, dude? And then it does seem like he, obviously eventually comes around, but he's like, no, this is way too much. Absolutely not. I can't do this. It's interesting, her reaction to what he's saying, because her approach, I mean, you could read it a number of ways, I guess, because when I read how Ambrose lies to Kvothe about having candles and the archives and everything, and how that's normal, it reads as normal until you find out he was lying to him the whole time. You could almost feel like that's the same here, but I don't have anything to compare it to. You know what I mean?
Well, here's the way, like, I think of it is, like, would I take a loan with a guy? Would I borrow money from a guy if by borrowing money from him, he would have the power to slit my throat while I'm asleep without even being in the room with me?
That's a good point.
Probably not going to do it.
Yeah, probably not going to do that.
Probably not going to give him where he has easy access to kill me while I'm sleeping in my room, even when he's not in the same room as me, and he still would have the ability to kill me with ease.
Well, her response to that is, would I stay in business if I made a habit of malfeasance? And then, of course, he's like, well, do the masters know about this? Well, no, of course not. What are you talking about? But,
Yeah, they both of them make sense. Like, from her perspective, she's not going, if she wants to be in business, and she has been in business for a while, it's not going to do her any good. The first person she killed is going to be the last time she gets a customer.
Yeah.
Once that, that's the threat and the danger. If she fucks someone over without very good cause, then her business is ruined. And, it's not like she can force people to continue doing business with her. So she really can't do anything unless it's with extremely justifiable reasons where people would understand and they'd be like, well, I would never do what he did. So that makes sense that she took revenge on that guy. But even then, you start putting that doubt in people's head, you're going to be hurting your business. So it makes sense on both ends, where she's protected, they're protected because she's not going to want to lose business. So it makes sense, but it also makes sense that both of them would be very cautious, and especially if they're meeting each other for the first time, you're going to be very, very unnerved by what she can do with your blood.
Yeah, I like their whole back and forth. It does a good job of sort of building out again for us all the things that Kvothe has to assess for. How this can possibly work for him, work against him. What options does he have? He wouldn't be there if this wasn't basically his best option. But he basically leaves without a solution. And he's only got like 12 hours or something. So it's like, all right, well, so what am I going to do then?
Yeah, and you get her true intentions. You get it in this chapter because he's like, what happens if I can't pay? Then we work something out between the two of us, like rational people. Maybe you work for me, tell me secrets, do me favors. That's what she's really after, is putting the screws to someone for the favors.
Yeah, it makes sense.
He backs out, and then, like we said, he goes and he gets his loot. Fucking really, really works the shit out of the guy. And like tests the water with the strings are old. Actually, they were fine, but I hoped he didn't know that. True, he said, reassured me of his ignorance. The strings are cheap. And then set the strings, tune the instrument so it would play very badly. And he played it. He's like, hey, man, I think this fucking bowl is cracked. I don't want to give this to my brother. Like, I don't like him, but I'm not that big of a dick. And he works him all the way down to basically where he could take the loan out, get the loot, and still have enough money to buy a room at the Muse, the meal chit in the room. But he was basically penniless after that, though.
I love, though, I mean, he talks him way down. Like that,
yeah.
But he does test it in such a great way because the guy asks for a certain price and brings it down before he's even done anything.
Yeah.
So he already knows he's working with somebody that's sort of desperate to get rid of this thing, and then he makes it worse. The guy doesn't know shit about it, so he just makes it seem like it's more of a piece of shit than it actually is. But what really speaks towards it is what we talked about with the Denna resin addict, where he's like desperate for this thing, but still has the balls to give him like a super low price. But the guy takes it. Kvothe's a hustler, man.
Yeah, he fucking worked him.
Yeah, he hustles this dude.
And that guy should not be running a pawn shop. No. That is not the line of work for that dude. Like, he's a terrible salesman. He got fucking ran over by the customer. It's not a good sign, buddy.
Yeah.
You're in the wrong line of business. Yeah, and then obviously, he goes and makes the deal with her and gets the 4 talents and goes back to the university with money in my purse and the comfortable weight of the loot strap hanging from my shoulder. It was secondhand, ugly, and it cost me dearly in money, blood, and peace of mind. I loved it like a child, like breathing, like my own right hand. Yeah,
again, I love that's where we get back to what I was talking about earlier. That's the Kvothe, just kind of the transition in him through the chapter where it's like, all right, I got to do this. I don't want to do this, but I got to do this. And it's like, oh, I can't do this. It's this, that's too much. You're asking for too much. I can't take that much of a risk. And then he tantalizes himself with something we haven't been able to, I remember missing the music at this point because it's so much, it's a lot of fun to read him playing. And how much he enjoys it and everything. And then, sort of teases that out, and then he just goes full in. Like, I remember when I read where he just goes, 4 would be better. And I was just like, whoa, a little bit surprised, But he's like, well, if I'm going to go halfway in, I might as well go all in. Of course, he needs it because of the loot, but still, I like it.
And when he gets the loot, that brings back another element to the story, that the writing for the way he writes music is just so phenomenal that it's one of the most impressive parts of his writing, and it's going to get introduced back into the story again, which obviously also brings him to Ari, and so much interesting stuff comes of that, and Flurry and his music with her. So like, music's going to play such a huge role for the rest of the books, and we go a long time without it.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, you kind of speculated on that, and I wonder if that's going to have a part in. It seems to have a part in his sleeping mind. His knack for it, right, or his ability to access it.
Yeah, it seems like there's some kind of magical ability with his playing the instrument. It doesn't necessarily seem like it's his singing. It seems like it's his playing.
Yeah.
That it has some kind of magical ability to it. Like when he's playing by himself, when he plays for the groups, when he plays for people, they get wrecked with emotions. So I think there's some kind of magical aspect to his ability to play music.
Yeah, I think there's something there. I wonder if...
And Ari, too. Like, he's able to lure her out of her hole, and she feels more comfortable with him than anybody. And
yeah,
a lot of aspects to his music that seem magical.
It definitely does seem to unlock. Well, I mean, it's kind of what he uses as his way to get out of the Fae, right? It's how he's able to kind of manipulate Felurian's hold she has over him. So yeah, I mean, he leverages it. Plus, dude, he fucking depends on it. It's like his crutch. It's one of the things that keeps him sane, right? It's like it's a big part of who he is as an individual, and when he loses it, he's not healthy. That's where we are with Kvothe. He's very, very unhealthy, literally dying. So,
I'm curious where it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to play a role, but I think there's more than likely going to be some kind of magical element to his playing music. Maybe like it's going to be required to open one of the doors.
Yeah, I wonder. Now I'm thinking a lot about the shaping business. I wonder if he's able to like wield those powers in a way that's particularly exceptional by being able to utilize his musical abilities. I don't know.
Yeah, could be that he's able to kind of change things, shape things once he starts playing his instrument.
Yeah, I wonder. What do you think? Like a Virgin? Do you think that'll be the tune, or? Maybe...
I mean, that's the obvious choice. That's what everybody is picturing as, like a Virgin. Really thinking of Madonna, she's changed a lot over the years.
Yeah, that's true.
And so obviously music changes you. Like, it changes your face. You don't even look like the same person anymore. So that's the obvious choice. He might go with something less obvious, but that would be the obvious choice. That's probably it for this episode. We're next time we'll run into, he'll get his loot, he'll learn more at the artificery, and we might get into him going to the Aeolian and getting his talent pipes.
And meeting Denna.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Not far we'll get, but we're right on the cusp of him.
That's a great
bringing Denna back in. Yeah, it's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Fucking.
I said meet
fucking
Denna.
Douchebag Ambrose again tries to fuck him over and fucking ends up again. I was
gonna say just like him,
a more legendary moment.
Yeah, just like him, he just puts him on another level, and actually helps him.
But all right. Oh, the big thing I think we learned this episode is, it's nice to get that weight off.
Yeah. It was much more. I felt like I was swimming without a life preserver, is what it felt like.
Oh yeah, it just felt free. It just really, really felt good. Yeah. Like, I don't know, like we were clicking on a different level.
No ham sandwiches.
So much better. It's not even comparable. I mean, we'll bring the weight back for the next episode, but at least you guys get to see what it could have been, what the podcast could have been.
Well, that's if he's earned his way back, right? Because you said you were banning you're banning him, so we'll see if he can come back. If you're going to allow it, is that what's going on? I mean,
yeah, I'll bring him back. Well, I think one episode ban is good enough, and it gives the disappointing thing is now that the audience has seen what it could have been, that's going to be disappointing for everybody.
But humility, man, humility.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm very humble, and I'm going to humbly let him back in, and we'll just accept the lower quality.
I guess like on the top of the back of the shirt, most humble. Yeah. Right? Just brag that out. That should be there.
I'm more humble than you on the front. More humble than everyone on the back.
Yeah, more humble than everyone. That's solid. That's definitely solid.
All right, folks. We will see you next time. Peace out.
Yep. Stay humble.